No matter where one was, the pre-celestial stage and the post-celestial stage were completely different existences. This heaven was the huge chasm between mortals and celestials. Since ancient times, how many proud sons of heaven were all blocked outside this layer of heaven, unable to take half a step forward in their entire lives. When Ningchen arrived at Xuanji Peak, he walked straight into Xuanji Hall. It was completely empty and there was not a single person in sight. In the hall, ancient books were placed on a long bluestone table. The paper and bamboo slips were yellowed and emitted the aura of time. Ningchen stepped forward and flipped through the ancient books. A strange look flashed in his eyes. These were all books that he had read in the scripture pavilion. Why would they appear here? In the past, he had read these books because he wanted to understand more about this world, especially to deduce the purpose of the Eternal Life Hall. But to Meng Xuanji, these books were of no use. The only explanation was that Meng Xuanji wanted to know his motive. Among the many books, there was one ancient book that was more special. Ma Bai could recognize it at a glance from the other books. Back then, Meng Xuanji had cast the separation and reunion death seal on him. After bringing him to Xuanji Peak, she had given him this cultivation technique. At that time, he didn't want to owe anyone anything, so he hadn't touched it. Outside Xuanji Hall, the Nine Clouds sect leader, the Sword Venerable, and the others had also arrived. They entered the hall and looked at the young man in front of them with complicated expressions. Fear, anger, forbearance, and relief finally turned into a deep sense of helplessness. To have such achievements at such a young age, what kind of terrifying talent did he have? They didn't know that Ningchen wasn't considered a genius. Everything he had today was exchanged for by ordinary people. The pain he had suffered was more than 100 or 1,000 times more than ordinary people. After Meng Xuanji left, did the Eternal Life Hall come again? Ningchen turned and looked at the Nine Clouds sect leader calmly. The Sword Venerable understood the sect leader's temper and didn't want to have another conflict, so he stood out and answered, "They did. A few months ago, the Disaster King came personally to borrow the Golden Feather Dragon. He also brought 3 cultivators of the third tribulation of the Khanate realm with him. However, the Golden Feather Dragon was taken away by junior sister Xuanji. The Disaster King came too late and could only leave." Ningchen narrowed his eyes and continued, "One last question, does the Golden Feather Dragon have the ability to break through space?" "Yes." The Nine Clouds sect leader answered. The Sword Venerable also nodded. The Golden Feather Dragon was the sharpest weapon in the world. It did have this ability. At this moment, Ningchen finally confirmed the suspicion he had for a long time. The Disaster King had spent so much effort to obtain the Golden Feather Dragon because he wanted to break through the boundary between the two realms. "Thank you for your answer." As soon as he finished speaking, Ningchen raised his hand and pointed. Suddenly, silver light fell from the sky and an incomparably resplendent sword intent condensed. In an instant, it passed through the Xuanji Palace and slashed at the distant Heavenly Cast Peak. With a rumble, a clear sword mark appeared on Heavenly Cast Peak. It was so dazzling under the moonlight. "It really is you." The Sword Venerable was shocked. He immediately recognized this incomparable sword intent and exclaimed, "This sword strike is to repay the kindness of the Nine Clouds sect for taking me in back then. We'll meet again someday." As soon as she finished speaking, her white clothes scattered and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. The Nine Clouds sect leader, the Flower Venerable, and the Medicine Venerable also felt the familiar aura in the majestic sword intent. A strange look flashed across their faces. It really was him. In this way, many of their previous doubts could be explained. When they went to the longevity banquet of the Holy Land, the Eternal Life Hall secretly sent Khanate cultivators to seize the Golden Feather Dragon. In the end, they were stopped by a mysterious swordsman. A few months ago, when Ning Chen's identity was announced to the world by the Holy Land, they had such suspicions. Now that they saw it with their own eyes, they truly confirmed it. "Patriarch, I'm going back to Heavenly Cast Peak." The Sword Venerable was worried about the sword intent a moment before. He cupped his fist and turned into a sword. Lights flickered as he flew back to Celestial Sword Peak. Ning Chen left, but he didn't leave the continent of the 9 clouds. Instead, he flew up into the sky. This was something that he had always been curious about. Why did he fall from the sky back then? It was late at night and the wind was cold. Up in the sky, it was extremely cold. It was unbearable. The higher he went, the stronger the gravitational force of the 4 extremes continent became. Ning Chen's chi was being consumed rapidly. The life volume and the celestial volume revolved, and a huge vortex appeared around him. Extremely cold chi entered his body and rose up. He was barely able to resist the gravitational force. The earth volume's chi was much dimmer. It was too far away from the ground, and the environment was extremely bad. It was difficult to use it. 1,000 zhang later, the fog disappeared. It was extremely silent. The moonlight couldn't illuminate the eternal darkness. Ning Chen was standing in the sky. He didn't understand. Something wasn't right. More accurately, there was something wrong with this world. His sword and blade flew into his hand. Dazzling lights flashed. His sword and blade emitted dazzling lights at the same time. The sword and blade resonated. Lights flashed and collided with the sky. In a flash, the entire sky started shaking violently. An earth-shattering explosion spread through the sky. However, the sky was unshakable. After shaking for a while, it returned to normal. In the holy palace of the 4 extremes Holy Land, the master of the 4 extremes territory sensed something. He used a secret technique to transmit his voice. The Disaster King, he's at the top of the 9 Clouds mountain. In the Long Life Temple, when the Disaster King heard the voice, he disappeared. The cultivators of the 3 disasters were extremely fast. Wherever they went, space became unstable and distorted. According to legends, when one reached the peak of the 3 disasters realm, one could tear space apart and travel 10,000 li in the blink of an eye. At the top of the 9 clouds, Ning Chen had no idea that his whereabouts had been discovered by the master of the 4 extremes territory and the Disaster King. Looking at the sky, he was indescribably shocked. His sword and blade had shaken away a trace of the illusion. Outside the sky, the moon and the starry sky were extremely clear. All of the light had been absorbed. However, the place closest to the sky was extremely dark. Looking back, the continent below was so far away that it was difficult to see it clearly. It was hard to imagine that for thousands of years, the sky in everyone's eyes was just a mirage. Ning Chen suppressed his shock and spread out his spiritual sense. He searched for traces of the past at the top of the 9 clouds. He believed that it wasn't just a coincidence that he had come here. There had to be some other reason. After searching for a long time, Ning Chen finally discovered something strange. Under the dusky sky, there was a slightly brighter place. Only by carefully examining it could he see that it was different from the rest. Spatial turbulence filled this abnormal sky. Ning Chen entered it with his sword and saber in hand. He was very careful. Among all the rules of heaven and earth, time and space were always the most unpredictable forces. If he was not careful, he would be sent to some unknown place by the spatial turbulence. I didn't expect you to be able to find this place. It seems I underestimated you. At this moment, a cold voice came from the void. A man stood in the void in the flowing light battle suit, his aura shaking the world. Disaster King, I'm honored to meet you here. Ning Chen was deep within the chaotic flows of space. He looked outside and calmly spoke. Don't think that just because you defeated Xian Cheng and the others that you can look down on everyone. The 3 disasters realm isn't a realm you can measure, snorted the Disaster King. Whether or not I can measure it isn't your concern. If you don't want to come in, you can just wait outside. Ning Chen casually replied and then ignored him. He carefully walked through the chaotic flows of space, doing his best to avoid being sucked in. Iciness flashed through the Disaster King's eyes. He also stepped into the chaotic flows of space. Spatial energy was extremely strange. Unless one was at the peak of the three disasters realm, no one would dare to rashly touch it. As one of the three disasters, the Disaster King's strength was extraordinary. However, he still had to be extremely careful in this chaotic flow of space. The instant the two of them intersected, sword light and palm energy appeared. However, before they could even reach their bodies, they were swallowed by space. The two of them once more entered different spaces. Chapter 252. In the strange spatial turbulence, an even stranger battle continued. The Disaster King and Ning Chen's figures crossed each other 3 times, but they were never able to truly clash. Under the sky, extremely weak streaks of light shone from unknown places. If one did not look carefully, it would be very difficult to discover them. Ning Chen followed the direction of the light and approached the sky as much as possible. However, in the spatial turbulence, he did not know where he would end up with each step he took. The Disaster King was the same. He could only rely on his most primitive instincts as a cultivator to find his opponent's tracks. After crossing paths again, the Disaster King gathered his chi with a flip of his palm. Vast essence shook as he slapped out. The inky sword intent in Ning Chen's hand soared. He slashed out, and in an instant, he disappeared. The sword and palm collided. The palm energy devoured the sword intent, but it was once again brought into an unfamiliar space by the turbulence, disappearing without a trace. Ning Chen's intention was to approach the sky. He had no intention of fighting. He did not want to fight head-on. The Disaster King had come to take his life, so how could he give up so easily? He looked at the young figure that seemed to be right in front of him but was actually countless spaces away. He moved his feet and chased with all his strength. In the spatial turbulence, the flow of time was clearly different from the outside world. The two people who had entered could not feel the flow of time, but several days and nights had already passed in the outside world. It seemed to be less than 3,000 meters away, but only after entering would one realize that a short distance was the end of the world, let alone 3,000 meters away. Silver spatial turbulence constantly flew around the two of them. Occasionally, there would be even more terrifying turbulent storms, whistling and rushing about. It was extremely shocking. In space, there was no place that was absolutely safe. The surroundings that seemed calm could become the center of a terrifying turbulent storm in the next moment. The turbulent streams danced about. Ning Chen's blade and sword would occasionally swing about. The feeling of the blade standing above space was extremely strange. It was as if there was nothing there, but also as if it was indestructible. Unavoidable dangers existed at all times. Even someone as strong as the Disaster King did not dare to be careless. When turbulent storms appeared, he would avoid them as much as he could. If he got lost in space, it would not be as easy to get out as imagined. Apart from the great perfection of the three disasters, no one dared to say that they could survive in the spatial turbulence forever. The two of them did not encounter each other often. Ning Chen intentionally avoided him, and his strength was far greater than before. The Disaster King had no choice but to chase after him with all his strength. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, another half a month had passed. The two of them still had not come out. The four extremities sent Xian Tian to investigate, but in the end, they found nothing and could only return to report. At the same time, in the earthly craftsman's manor, Jiang Xian had already been here for a month. The earthly craftsman admired the independent and hardworking habits that he had cultivated since he was young. In comparison, the little boy seemed to be more lazy. Children were always more playful. If one did not pay attention, he would run off without a trace. The matter of pulling the bellows was naturally handed over to Jiang Xian, and Jiang Xian did not have any complaints either. Aside from working, she would work hard to cultivate, and neither would interfere with the other. Ever since the eldest princess returned from the Sudden Thunder dynasty, she had visited the Earth Craftsman Manor a few times. As for why, only Li Yuwei herself knew. Over the past month, Li Yuwei had seen Jiang Xian in the Earth Craftsman Manor. At first, she didn't know what was going on, but after a long time, she gradually figured out what was going on. In the end, Jiang Xian did not know much about the ways of the world. In this regard, there was a huge gap between him and Li Yue, who had been in the imperial court for many years. Many times, he would unconsciously reveal flaws. The Earth Craftsman did not say much. In his eyes, the eldest princess of the Lihua dynasty was someone who could be trusted, apart from having some problems with her personality. There were very few things that Li Yue could not figure out. In just a few days, Jiang Xian's identity had been thoroughly investigated and deceived, and she found out everything about her. After a few more days, the two became good sisters who talked about everything. In particular, when Jiang Xian heard that the eldest princess in front of her was her master's friend, she trusted Li Yue even more. Regarding Ning Chen's past, Li Yue very quickly asked Jiang Xian about it. When she learned that he was not a spy of the otherworld as the sacred land had said, she subconsciously heaved a sigh of relief. During this period, Li Yan also came once to personally inquire about the forging of the weapon of destiny. When he saw that there was an additional little girl in the Earth Craftsman manor, a trace of curiosity appeared on his face. Li Yue whispered a few words in his ear, and only then did Li Yan nod, a strange light flashing across his eyes. Half a day later, Li Yan left. Before he left, he once again looked thoughtfully at Jiang Xian, and then left with a heavy heart. The day of forging the weapon was set to a month later. The Lihua dynasty would open the furnace and forge the weapon of destiny of the Lihua dynasty. Among the four great dynasties, only the Lihua dynasty did not have its own weapon of destiny. The dragon vein of the country was all suppressed by the sacred land. This was also one of the reasons why the Lihua dynasty had always been unable to break free from the sacred land's restraints. The concept of destiny had existed since ancient times. Although it seemed illusory, once one reached a certain level of cultivation, one would be able to experience the mysterious power that could almost affect heaven and earth. The conditions for forging the weapon of destiny were very strict. The Lihua dynasty had secretly prepared for nearly 100 years and barely managed to gather all the materials. Only with the existence of this generation's earth craftsman was there a possibility of forging the weapon. On the other hand, the matter of forging the weapon had to be kept a secret, especially not to be discovered by the sacred land. Otherwise, all previous efforts would be wasted. In the Lihua palace, Li Yan stood in the main hall and paced for a long time. His eyes flashed with struggles several times, but in the end, he steeled his heart and walked to the dragon throne to write a letter. When the person raised his head again, the struggle in Li Yan's eyes had disappeared, leaving only determination and indifference. Present. A guard walked over and knelt down. Send this letter out according to the method written on it. Remember, it must be kept a secret, especially not to let the eldest princess's people see it, Li Yan said coldly. Yes. The guard received the order, got up, took the letter, and quickly left. Your Majesty, I'm afraid that doing this will hurt the eldest princess's heart, an old figure walked out and advised softly. Qin Yan's expression did not change much. He said indifferently, those who achieve great things do not bother about trifles. I will repay the favor I owe you in the future. The old man sighed softly and said, since your Majesty has already decided, I won't say anything more. With that, the old man retreated into the darkness and disappeared. In the following days, in the Earth Craftsman manor, the imperial family was secretly preparing for the forging of the weapon in a month's time. The little boy and Jiang Xian, on the other hand, were free. The two of them did not know the situation and did not need to work every day. They only needed to focus on practicing the saber or sword. Outside the imperial city, Elderly, who was guarding the Lihua dynasty, also had a heavy heart. He maintained his usual low-profile life and tried his best not to attract the attention of the people from the sacred land. The 100-year plan of the Lihua dynasty depended on these less than 2 months. There must not be any mistakes. The cold moon hung high in the sky, and half the night had passed. In the eldest princess manor, Li Yue still had not rested. She was also thinking about the forging of the weapon. The forging of the weapon of destiny was not something that could be done in a day or two. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, she had to think of a way to attract the attention of the sacred land elsewhere. Li Yue stood up and said, "Come in." "Yes." A black-clothed figure appeared outside the door and said respectfully, "Mobilize all the spies in our hands and spread fake news about the spies of the eastern region," Li Yue said in a deep voice. "Yes." The black-clothed figure received the order and disappeared into the night in the blink of an eye. The emperor of the Lihua dynasty and the eldest princess had used the same methods in the same day for the same purpose. However, the different methods led to a world of difference in the results. At the top of the ninth heaven, in the endless space turbulence, Ning Chen and the Disaster King had already been in it for a month. Every step they took was extremely careful, always on guard against the space storms that would suddenly appear out of nowhere. Ning Chen was not too far away from the canopy at the top of the ninth heaven. His sword and saber shook off streams of light as he continued forward. On the other side, the Disaster King was in a different space. His frown grew deeper and deeper. Although he could not feel the passage of time in the space turbulence, he could roughly guess that he had been in there for a long time. Ha! With a long shout, the Disaster King's body continued to rise, shining brilliantly. He flipped his palm and slapped the space turbulence in front of him. In the next moment, his figure swept past as he moved forward with all his might. Feeling the violent space vibrations around him, Ning Chen was careful and tried to increase his speed as much as possible. Clang! The sword and palm collided again in an unexpected encounter. The beautiful saber slashed across, creating a dazzling brilliance. The Disaster King turned sideways and flipped his palm again. The figure in front of him disappeared again. The space turbulence surged, annihilating all auras. Close by, Ning Chen suppressed the surging blood qi in his body. His expression did not change as he continued forward. Finally, after more than half a month in the outside world, the canopy at the top of the ninth heaven gradually appeared in front of him. The brilliance grew brighter and brighter, as if it was sunlight from another world. Fine cracks appeared on the beautiful saber and the green ink sword in Ning Chen's hands. Especially the body of the beautiful saber, which was covered with cracks. It could shatter at any time. The two weapons were not divine weapons after all. They could not withstand the erosion of the power of space. Coupled with the fact that he had to fight with the Disaster King from time to time, they could not bear the burden anymore. The brilliance under the canopy was so familiar. Ning Chen waved his sword and gathered power. Frost drifted in the air. He shook off the illusion in front of him and looked at the scene behind the canopy. It was not the sun, nor was it the starry sky. It was a piece of scorched land. It was desolate and silent. Ascension Valley. Ning Chen was shocked. There was no mistake. It must be Ascension Valley. In the end, he attracted the heavenly tribulation and heavenly punishment here. He dragged all the half-dead Xiantian monsters to the grave with him, turning the entire Ascension Valley into a land of death. It turned out that the four extremes and the divine land of imminent land that he had been looking for so long were really here. Are you surprised? Unfortunately, it's too late. As he spoke, the Disaster King walked out. His flowing light battle armor shone brightly and was exceptionally dazzling. Ning Chen sneered. He did not panic at all. His saber and sword danced. Amidst the blue brilliance and snowflakes, the saber and sword intent rose rapidly. The ninth heaven shook, and all things flickered rapidly. Seeing that his opponent's moves were extraordinary, the Disaster King's expression turned serious. He flipped his palm and activated Vast Essence. He was on full alert. See you never. At this moment, Ning Chen's figure flashed. He entered the space turbulence and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The Disaster King was stunned. He was furious. He blasted away the turbulence in front of him with a palm and quickly chased after him. Chapter 253. In the chaotic flow of space, Baiyi's figure flashed, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Now that he had seen what he wanted to see, Ning Chen's path no longer followed any pattern. After 10 days, the Disaster King was unable to find any trace of him. At the border between the northern and eastern regions, space rippled, and Bai Yi walked out. Ning Chen looked at his surroundings. For a moment, he did not know where he was. With a move of his feet, he rushed towards a nearby city. At the peak of the 9 heavens, the Disaster King appeared, but he was not at his original location. He was thousands of miles away. Disaster King, return quickly. Without the obstruction of the chaotic flow of space, the Master of the 4 Extreme Realms order finally reached the Disaster King's ears. The order was very urgent, as if there was something important that needed to be said. The Disaster King didn't hesitate. He turned into a streak of light and flew away. Within the Longevity Hall, the Disaster King returned. Multicolored light gathered in the air, and an illusory figure condensed. Disaster King, what was the result? He escaped. Furthermore, the border between the 2 realms has been exposed, said the Disaster King gloomily. The Master of the 4 Extreme Realms was silent for a moment before slowly saying, in that case, that child can't be allowed to live. Our spies have reported that they found the whereabouts of the general's daughter. I'll send Xian Tian to help, as well as Yu Yang Tian, Xingyun, and Buyu. This time, we have to eliminate that child no matter what. The Disaster King frowned slightly. Isn't that making a mountain out of a molehill? Xian Tian was a 5th tribulation expert, and even Yu Yang Tian, Xingyun, and Buyu were at the 3rd tribulation. Adding on the fact that he was on the side, it was far too absurd for them to just deal with a 3rd tribulation expert. The Master of the 4 Extreme Realms shook his head. It's fine. The most important thing is to make sure nothing goes wrong. Although the Disaster King didn't agree, he still nodded. Once that was done, the Master of the 4 Extreme Realms figure rapidly vanished. As the final trace of multicolored light faded away, the hall returned to its former calm. Only after the Master of the 4 Extreme Realms left did a black-robed figure walk in. The Disaster King glanced at him and gravely said, "How is it? Have you found Meng Xuanji's whereabouts?" "Reporting to the Palace Master, there's still no news," replied the person kneeling on the ground. "A bunch of trash." "Keep looking," said the Disaster King. "Yes." The black-clothed figure stood up and quickly walked out of the hall. The Disaster King's eyes flickered with cold light. This Meng Xuanji was clearly suspicious of the Long Life Temple and the 4 Extreme Holy Lands. She refused to show herself, testing his patience. However, his patience was limited. When his patience ran out, the entire continent of the 9 clouds would be buried because of her stupidity. Ning Chen stayed in the city at the border of the Northern Territory and the Eastern Territory for half a day. Finally, he understood where he had been thrown to after walking out of the space turbulence. The Disaster King shouldn't be able to catch up. There was no sense of time or direction in the chaotic flow of space, so the chances of the 2 of them appearing in the same place was almost negligible. The border between the 2 realms had been made clear. Ning Chen wanted to continue looking for Meng Xuanji, but after hearing the rumors about him and his senior's whereabouts, he couldn't help but stop. Something was wrong. Ning Chen's mind was clear, and he quickly noticed the abnormality. In the 4 extremities, no one would risk offending the sacred land to spread false information to help him and his seniors. It was impossible for his senior to do such a thing. He had thought about it before, but he hadn't had the time to do it. Now, someone had done it first. The only explanation was that this person needed to use false information to attract the sacred land's attention. Ning Chen walked on the bustling streets of the city, quickly thinking about what was going on. The Disaster King had just parted with him, so it was easy for him to distinguish the truth of the news and not fall for it. The sacred land and the Eternal Life Hall were definitely connected. In other words, the sacred land wouldn't believe these rumors. The person who spread these rumors naturally didn't know about this, and they also had a grudge with the sacred land. The target was actually very easy to confirm. The Lihua dynasty. Thinking of this, Ning Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. If he guessed correctly, the Lihua dynasty must have made some big move that they didn't want the sacred land to know about. He had a decent relationship with Li Yuwei, and this woman could be considered trustworthy. He wondered if there was a need to go over and warn her. Perhaps he could take this opportunity to ask the earthly blacksmith to help him repair the sword in his hand, and at the same time take a look at Jiang Xian's cultivation. In the Lihua Valley in the north of the imperial city of the Lihua dynasty, the weapon forging had already started for more than 10 days. Li Yan, Li Yuwei, Elder Li, and a royal consecrator were all looking at the earthly blacksmith on the weapon forging table with serious expressions. Sweat mixed with fire splashed everywhere with the sound of hammering. The earthly blacksmith's expression was unprecedentedly focused. Every hammering was accurate to the extreme. This was the result of day after day of practice. There were no shortcuts. Whether it was forging ordinary weapons or divine weapons, the craftsman's skill was the most crucial factor in determining the quality. The outstanding craftsmen in the sacred land were passed down from generation to generation. However, the Lihua dynasty only had one earthly blacksmith in the past few hundred years. This was also why the Lihua royal family was so anxious to forge their own weapon of destiny. In the earthly blacksmith manor, the snow had stopped not long ago. In the courtyard, the little boy and Jiang Xian were practicing seriously. Xiaoyu was young and made many mistakes easily. Every time this happened, Jiang Xian would stop and patiently explain to her without any impatience. Da. At this moment, the sound of horse hooves could be heard. A man dressed as a guard stopped the carriage in front of the earthly blacksmith manor. After showing his token, he entered the manor. When the little boy and Jiang Xian saw the person who had come, they were puzzled. "Miss Jiang Xian, Her Highness the eldest princess invites you," the guard said respectfully as he handed over a letter from Li Yuwei. When Jiang Xian heard the guard call her name, she was startled at first. However, when she heard the words eldest princess, she calmed down. The handwriting on the letter was undoubtedly Li Yuwei's. After reading the letter, Jiang Xian no longer had any doubts. She said a few words to the little boy and left with the guard. The carriage was already waiting outside the manor. Jiang Xian stepped onto it. The guard started the carriage and immediately rushed towards the south. The carriage quickly left the imperial city and the Lihua Valley to the north of the imperial city. A faint fragrance filled the air in the carriage. Jiang Xian quickly lost consciousness. Soon, she completely lost consciousness. The carriage did not stop at all. No one knew where it was going. Night fell. In Qingli City, in the eldest princess manor, a white figure walked out. His spiritual sense scanned the entire manor, but he did not find the person he was looking for. Ning Chen frowned slightly. He moved his feet and rushed towards the west. In the earthly craftsman manor, Ning Chen appeared. When he found that the little boy was the only one left in the manor, he immediately had a bad feeling. "Xiaoyu." Ning Chen came to the little boy's room and woke him up. "Big brother Ning." The little boy was not asleep yet. When he woke up and saw the familiar figure in front of him, his little face lit up and he called out happily. "Where's your master and Jiang Xian? Why are you alone in the manor?" Ning Chen quickly asked. "Master has already left the manor for more than 10 days. I don't know where he went. Sister Jiang Xian was just invited by the eldest princess people today. She should be in the eldest princess manor right now," the little boy said honestly. "Oh no." Ning Chen's expression changed. In a flash, he disappeared. The earthly craftsman manor was located in the most remote part of the imperial city. People rarely came here, especially after the heavy snow last night. A thick layer of snow had accumulated on the ground, making the two carriage tracks outside the manor very clear. Ning Chen followed the tracks for a long time until he could no longer distinguish them. However, he also confirmed the direction the carriage had left in. In the Lihua Valley, Li Yan's expression was unusually cold. He looked at the weapon of destiny that was gradually taking shape on the weapon forging table, and his eyes kept flashing with brilliance. After forging this weapon and finding a way to transfer the hundreds of years of destiny in the dragon vein into it, the Lihua dynasty would be one step closer to breaking free from the control of the sacred grounds. Those who wanted to achieve great things could not be constrained by small details. As long as the weapon of destiny could be successfully forged, it was worth sacrificing anyone. On the side, Li Yuwei did not know that the brother she trusted the most had secretly made the most heartless decision. In order to successfully forge the weapon, he had taken the initiative to give Jiang Xian to the 4 sacred grounds. On the weapon forging table, green jade wood, blazing sun iron, purple marked divine gold, moon rock, and dozens of other rare divine materials had been perfectly merged together after being hammered thousands of times by the black gold giant hammer. The divine materials of various colors were mixed together. In the end, the weapon of destiny returned to its original white color. It was sparkling and translucent. It was very unique. The earthly craftsman's expression became more and more serious. As a craftsman, he only wanted to forge the most perfect weapon in his life. Without a doubt, this was his last and only chance. To the south of the imperial city, a white figure flashed past. Gradually, Ning Chen sensed a familiar aura, and he sped up. He had forcefully opened up Jiang Xian's sea of qi with the life scroll, so he was extremely sensitive to the little girl's aura. As long as it was not too far away, he would more or less be able to sense it. In front of Half Moon Mountain, Ning Chen caught up with the carriage. Sensing that something was wrong with Jiang Xian's aura, he slashed the carriage open from 300 meters away and quickly rushed up. The guard's expression changed greatly. He did not expect someone to catch up to him. Just as he was about to move, a sword was pointed at his throat. Whose order is it? Ning Chen's face was incomparably ashen as he asked coldly. At this moment, the guard's eyes quickly dimmed. He would rather break his own meridians than reveal anything. Seeing that the guard was about to die, Ning Chen did not waste any more time. He carried Jiang Xian on his back and was about to leave. However, at this moment, a bloody blade of light fell from the sky and stabbed into the ground with a boom. The figure that approached was dressed in blood-red clothes. His red hair danced in the wind. He was like a blade god that had descended to the world. Return to the sacred grounds with me. I can't do it. Ning Chen clenched his right hand and the green ink flew into his hand. His sword intent vibrated, shaking the heaven and earth. The blade and the sword clashed again. 100 miles away, the Disaster King and the others who had been waiting for a long time did not see the promised figure. They were puzzled. 5 extremely powerful auras flew up and looked into the distance. There was a powerful enemy in front of him, and there was an encirclement behind him. Ning Chen did not know that he was at the edge of danger. He faced the bloody blade of light with a single sword. Luan Fengchen also did not know that the Disaster King and the others were 100 miles away. This killing plot against Ning Chen had not yet begun, but it had unexpectedly appeared earlier. Chapter 254. Under the Half Moon Mountain, Chaotic Wind Dust, who had been searching for Ning Chen, finally found the person he was looking for. His flowing light blood blade shone brightly, and he no longer held back. After retrieving his saber, the Saint Child of the Four Poles was even more powerful. Every move he made was far more oppressive than before. Ning Chen carried General Xian on his back and faced the enemy with a broken sword. Although he had some misgivings in his heart, he still did not fall into a disadvantageous position. The battle between the geniuses stirred up snowflakes that were hundreds of feet tall, blocking the view of the crowd and preventing them from seeing the battle clearly. Amidst the snowstorm, the flowing light and the snowy light constantly collided, each displaying their sharpness. No one was willing to take even half a step back. Earth Scroll, 1000 Earth Revolutions. The scroll of Earth appeared once more, causing the Earth to churn. Large patches of Earth split apart, rose up, and closed towards the center. It was like the scene of the end of the world, shaking the heavens and earth. Seeing this, Luan Fengchen's blood blade shone brightly, and he also used his ultimate skill. A red light flashed, and thousands of lightning bolts descended from the sky. The two moves collided, causing the earth to crumble and the mountains to crumble. The light of the sword and the saber clashed once again. It was abnormally intense. 100 miles away, the Disaster King and the others sensed the intense Shin-Chi fluctuations in the distance. Their figures flickered as they rushed over. In the fire canyon, Li Yan's mind spun. According to the plan, the daughter of the Jiang clan should have been delivered to the people of the Holy Land. With this woman around, the Sacred Lands would spend more of their energy on finding a way to lure Ning Chen out, which would greatly reduce the risk of them being discovered. The sound of the hammer hitting the weapon of destiny echoed throughout the canyon. It was the 13th day, and the final moment of success was not far away. The original white color was so dazzling. It flickered with a powerful aura within the inky blue leaf fire. Before the artifact was completed, there was already an unusual pressure circulating about. Li Yue looked at the weapon forging table, and her right eyebrow twitched uncontrollably. A sense of uneasiness rose in her heart, but after thinking about it carefully, she didn't find anything wrong, so she didn't pay it much mind. In front of the Half-Moon Mountain, the battle was still ongoing. On Ning Chen's back, Jiang Xian was still unconscious. The medicine of the Li Fire royal family was extraordinary. Even martial artists could not contend against it. Luan Feng Chen's expression was cold, and his red hair fluttered in the wind. The blade in his hand became sharper and sharper as he pressed forward, determined to bring this person back to the four extreme holy lands. Ning Chen was worried about his safety and didn't want to fight for a long time. He swung his sword and pushed the former away. Frost surged, and the love formula reappeared in the world. However, right at this moment, a powerful palm strike came from the distant horizon, illuminating the heavens and the earth. Ning Chen was startled. He pulled back his sword to block the attack. With a loud bang, he was pushed back a few steps. The blood in his body was boiling violently. The auras of the 6 figures that descended reached the sky. Their terrifying might blotted out the sky and covered the sun. It was extremely shocking. The Calamity King, Xian Tian, Yuyang Tian, Xing Yun, and Bu Yu were all experts above the 3rd tribulation of the Xiantian realm. In fact, Xian Tian and the Calamity King had already reached the 5th tribulation and the 3 calamities realm. The Disaster King glanced at General Hart on the former's back and sneered, "I was wondering where I went wrong. I didn't expect you to deliver yourself to me." Holy Sun. Yu Yangtian, Xing Yun, and Bu Yu saluted respectfully. Luan Fengchen frowned as he looked at the 4 people in front of him and asked, "Why are you here?" "The Realm Master has ordered us to assist the Disaster King in killing the spies of the Eastern Divine Prefecture." Xian Tian took half a step forward and answered. Luan Fengchen coldly harumphed, and waved his hand to put away his bloodlight blade. 5 against 1, and one of the 3 disasters, they were truly willing to do so. "We'll meet again if you're still alive." Luan Fengchen glanced at Ning Chen, who was surrounded by the 5, and turned to leave. Yu Yang Tian and the others didn't stop him. They all knew the Holy Sun's personality. Even if the Realm Master was here, he wouldn't be able to do anything. The sun set in the west, and a cold wind blew. The Holy Land's encirclement had begun once more. Ning Chen's expression became serious. He tore off a piece of cloth from his clothes and tied the unconscious General Hart to his back. Silver light rose from his azure ink sword, and frost rapidly condensed. Although he wasn't sure if Li Yue had really betrayed him, it definitely couldn't be a coincidence that the Calamity King and so many people from the Holy Land had appeared together. Kill! Yu Yang Tian's halberd was the first to attack. The humiliation of He Shihai being tricked was still fresh in his mind. Every time he thought of it, he would be filled with rage. Bang! The halberd and sword clashed. The ground beneath Ning Chen's feet suddenly split open, and a huge gully continuously extended hundreds of meters. Moving clouds and setting rain raised their swords at the same time. The 2 swords joined forces and sword light scattered, forming an impenetrable sword net. They joined forces and attacked. Seeing this, Ning Chen pushed Yu Yang Tian away with his sword. Snowflakes surged as he fought against the 2 swords. The 3 swords clashed. In an instant, dozens of moves had already passed. The dense sword net couldn't stop the swift and fierce sword aura. A sword swept past, and both of their bodies turned red at the same time. The halberd swept past again with the power to split open a mountain. Ning Chen took half a step back and waved his sword to block. Another shocking explosion sounded. Crack! With a clear crisp sound, the crack on the sword extended another half an inch. Ning Chen's eyes focused. His left hand grasped the air, and a beautiful saber appeared in his hand. He slashed out, and the beautiful saber light chased after the soul. Yang Tian's heart turned cold. He quickly retreated, but he was still half a step too late. With a ripping sound, the armor on his chest was cut open, and blood gushed out like a fountain. Xingyun, Buyu, and then a battle formation. The sword of cloud and rain was exquisite and long, and extremely complicated. Yang Tian suppressed his injuries and also stood up. The halberd's power was impressive and abnormally domineering. The three of them took turns to fight. The sword and halberd clashed. Ning Chen was fighting 1 against 3, but there was no fear on his face. He waved his saber and sword, and fought like a god. Qing Imo and the beautiful saber were waved in the last light of the setting sun. Blood was constantly spilling out. 3 against 1, they couldn't gain the slightest advantage. When the snow is about to fall, the sword will snow for 3,000 miles. The sword of pleasure caused the snowflakes on the ground to fly up into the sky. Although the frost spread in the wind and snow, the three's moves suddenly stagnated. The beautiful saber was dazzling, and a waterfall of blood bloomed again. Xian Tian. Seeing that the battle was not going well, the Disaster King glanced at the man who hadn't moved at all and reminded him. I can't help it. Xian Tian sighed in his heart. He waved his hand, and an ancient sword appeared in front of him. In the next moment, Hao's sword was unsheathed. His figure moved along with it, and he instantly entered the battle. Clang! In the intense battle, an unusually clear sound of swords clashing rang out. Qing Imo and Hao's sword clashed. The powerful sword intent immediately clashed violently and scattered in all directions. With a swoosh, Ning Chen's left face was slashed by the sword qi. As his black hair fluttered, a bloody scar appeared. Yang Tian, Xingyun, and Buyu immediately strengthened their attacks and encirclement. They were determined to kill the person in front of them completely. Xian Tian entered the battle, and his attacks instantly became several times stronger. Ning Chen was the first to show signs of weakness. At this moment, Jiang Xian, who had been unconscious all this while, slowly opened her eyes. She felt a familiar aura beside her and subconsciously shouted, "Master!" Ning Chen was distracted for a moment, and the beautiful saber in his left hand broke. With a swish, blood dyed his clothes red. The edge of Hao's sword was unusually sharp. In addition, the beautiful saber was already severely damaged in the spatial turbulence earlier. At this moment, it finally couldn't withstand the power of the battle and broke. Snow in July. Ning Chen shouted. Qing Imo and Yang Shui waved, and countless sword intents spread out. Yang Tian and the others were sent flying for more than 10 steps. The corners of their mouths were dyed red. Xian Tian took 3 steps back and suppressed his trembling aura. A strange expression flashed across his face. Could it be that all the swords of the divine land were this strong? Although the young man in front of him was still far from the blue-robed man's cultivation in the sword, it was already at an unimaginable level for his age. What kind of divine land could nurture such an outstanding swordsman? For the first time, Xian Tian had a trace of yearning for the eastern region's divine land. For someone who loved the sword and was obsessed with it, the best thing was to meet a better opponent. On Ning Chen's back, Jiang Xian also recovered her senses. She recalled what had happened. Seeing the encirclement in front of her, she immediately understood that her master had summoned a killing trap to save her. Master! Jiang Xian looked at the eye-catching bloodstains on her master's white clothes, and tears flashed in her eyes. It was all her fault for trusting others so easily. That was why she had brought so much trouble to her master. Hold on tight. Master will bring you to kill our way out. Ning Chen said softly. He swung his sword several times, and his figure flashed as he rushed toward Half Moon Mountain. Want to leave? Humph. At this moment, the Disaster King who had been observing the battle finally moved. He used vast essence gathering palm and used his full strength to move the power of heaven and earth. In an instant, all living things mourned, and gods and ghosts were frightened. Earth scroll, earth destruction, mountain destruction. Feeling the terrifying aura behind him, Ning Chen stopped and pulled back his sword. The mountain shook, and a powerful sword intent rushed out of the ground and collided with the incoming palm energy. With a loud bang, the earth scroll was unable to dissolve the three calamities' palm energy. Ning Chen's mouth was dyed red, and he retreated several steps. His figure turned into a ray of light and disappeared into the distance. Chase! The Disaster King coldly shouted. His figure flashed, and he quickly chased after Ning Chen. Four figures rushed forward, and Ning Chen, who had not gone too far, was quickly blocked by a sword. The two swords collided, and sparks flew everywhere. The light of the divine halberd rose behind Ning Chen. Ning Chen was worried about his safety, so he turned his hand back and condensed a sword finger. With a clang, the halberd light was knocked away. One sword against four, and the battle cries were endless. Even if the person in the battle had an unparalleled fighting spirit, under the intense consumption of true essence and blood qi, he gradually showed signs of exhaustion. His plain white clothes were now stained with blood. Some belonged to his opponent, and some belonged to him. In Ning Chen's hand, the green ink sword had also reached its limit. It could break apart at any time. Seeing her master getting more and more injured, Jiang Xian's tears kept falling from her eyes. She felt as if her heart was being cut by a knife. Master, put me down and leave first. Come back and save me if you have the chance in the future. Don't say stupid things. Master will definitely bring you out of this alive. Ning Chen reprimanded her tiredly. He fought and ran at the same time. He leaned to the side and dodged the halberd light in front of him. He waved his sword with his right hand to block the tip of the clear sword. Then, he saw the cloud and rain swords coming at him. Just as he was about to use his power, he felt his blood and qi stagnate, and his hand movements immediately slowed down. The sword finger knocked away the rain swords, but it could not block the cloud swords. A waterfall of blood bloomed, and dyed Jiang Xian's eyes red. Blood and tears covered her young face. Right at this moment, another powerful palm energy flew over. Ning Chen subconsciously waved his sword to block it. In the blink of an eye, his sword was broken, and he was sent flying. Pfff. Vomiting a mouthful of blood, Ning Chen stood up. His consciousness was in a daze. On his back, Jiang Xian was also sent flying by this terrifying palm and fell to the side. Jiang Xian. At the edge of the half-moon cliff, it was hard to find a way out. Ning Chen looked at Jiang Xian who was not far away. Just as he was about to take a step forward, he suddenly staggered. He had already reached his limit. Kill! The Disaster King gave the order without showing any mercy. Yu Yangtian and the others quickly surrounded him, wanting to end this battle without any suspense. At the edge of the cliff, Jiang Xian crawled up with difficulty. Her small face was now covered in blood and dust. After being washed by her tears, she looked like a little kitten. Master, Jiang Xian cannot implicate you anymore. With a brilliant smile and a final wish, Jiang Xian's body fell backwards, and she quickly fell down the endless cliff. Jiang Xian. Ning Chen's pupils shrank. He reached out to grab her, but it was already too late. He was unable to use his qi, and his master could only watch as the little girl who loved to cry and laugh for several months slowly disappeared into the cliff. The figure kneeling on the ground did not move at all. Yu Yangtian landed on the ground and retreated a few steps. He barely managed to stop himself as he spat out a mouthful of blood, dyeing the rocks in front of him red. At the same time, Xing Yunlin's sword intent surged. His cloud sword was as resplendent as the moon as he attacked with all his strength. "Be careful," Xian Tian hurriedly reminded. His clear sword shone brightly and turned into a stream of light to quickly follow. The blood pattern in the knowing destiny sword flowed. The three swords connected, and the sword aura leaned against each other. The clear sword blocked the tip of the sword, and the cloud sword continued to move forward. The moment it entered the body, blood splattered everywhere. Xian Tian took 3 steps back and his expression changed. Amidst the blood light, the knowing destiny sword slashed out. The dazzling sword light flashed and a horrifying sword wound appeared from Xian Yun's left chest to his right rib. Blood gushed out. "Xing Yunlin!" Xian Tian waved his sword and 3 sword lights shot out. His body flashed as he grabbed the heavily injured Xing Yunlin and retreated 300 meters away. The clear sword's light was extremely powerful. It was less than 3 meters away, and it was extremely fast. The knowing destiny sword blocked 2 of them, but it could not block the third. The sharp sword light passed through his body and dyed his clothes red again. He did not retreat, nor did he groan in pain. He was already on the verge of losing consciousness. "It's all over." Outside the battle, the Disaster King coldly snorted. He grasped the best opportunity and moved. Vast origin condensed in his palm and black light gathered. An incomparably ferocious aura once again appeared in the world. The figure at the edge of the cliff had his black hair dyed red. He did not move at all. Blood continued to flow on the tip of his sword. He did not move at all. At this moment of crisis, an extremely dazzling golden light streaked across the sky, instantly arriving at the battlefield. Its sharp chi was extremely shocking. The sudden attack made the Disaster King's heart tremble. He turned his sword palm around and blocked the incoming attack. With a loud bang, the mountain collapsed and the world shook. A beautiful figure instantly entered the battle. She grabbed the unconscious Ning Chen and turned into a stream of light that rapidly flew away. "Meng Xuanji!" The Disaster King waved his hand to knock away the falling mountain rocks. As he watched the 2 disappear, his complexion became extremely ugly. Seeing that the person he had surrounded was rescued, Xian Tian silently put away his sword. He walked over to the dead Buyu and carefully carried him on his back. He said, "Xing Yunlin, let's go." Xing Yunlin reluctantly nodded. He dragged his heavily injured body and silently followed. Not too far away, Yu Yangtian hesitated for a moment. In the end, he picked up his broken divine halberd and left with them. The Disaster King ignored them. His figure flashed and he quickly chased after the 2. On Half Moon Mountain, a cold wind blew. After the 3 of them left, a figure appeared. He walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down. Then, without any hesitation, he jumped down the cliff. Jiang Xian's face flashed past so quickly that no one could see it clearly. Only the familiar leaning moon saber reflected a flash of brilliance in the night, and it was bone-chilling. Below the fire valley, the hammering sounds became more and more frequent. The forging of the weapon of destiny had reached the final critical moment. In just a few hours, it would be complete. Li Yue's beautiful face no longer had the seductive smile of the past. Her expression was grave as she waited for the weapon to be completed. To the side, Li Yan frowned when he saw that the messenger had yet to return. A trace of unease flashed through his heart. He did not know what had gone wrong. "Elder Chu, go take a look," Li Yan said softly to the old man beside him. "Yes." The old man nodded. His figure flashed and he instantly left the valley. "Brother, is something the matter?" Li Yue asked with a trace of suspicion. "It's nothing. Just a small matter," Li Yan replied. Li Yue nodded and did not ask any more questions. She turned her gaze and continued to look at the weapon of destiny in the fire valley with unusual concentration. Half a month later, Meng Xuanji put Ning Chen down beside a stream 3,000 miles away from Shangxi. Her hands drew a series of complicated seals. With a flash of light, the complete separation and reunion death seal entered Ning Chen's body. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared. After doing all this, Meng Xuanji turned her palm and condensed her qi. She activated her mighty True Yuan and quickly healed Ning Chen's injuries. Ugh, Ning Chen grunted painfully. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The aura around him was extremely chaotic. The force of the halberd and palm kept filling his meridians, resisting the external True Yuan. Meng Xuanji's eyes narrowed. She activated her qi and suppressed the chaotic aura with all her might. Golden phoenix blood flowed through his beating heart. After passing through his meridians, it returned to his heart. It kept repeating and quickly repaired Ning Chen's severely injured body. An hour later, Meng Xuanji stopped. She looked at the person in front of her and quietly waited for him to wake up. The bright moon moved to the west. There was not much time left for the night. Ning Chen finally opened his eyes beside the stream. 3 different kinds of light flashed and disappeared into the depths of his eyes. Meng Xuanji. Seeing the woman in front of him, Ning Chen's eyes flashed. Just as he was about to speak, he immediately felt that something was wrong with his body. The familiar aura of the separation and reunion death seal was many times stronger this time. Your life is in my hands now. Can you tell me your true identity? Meng Xuanji asked indifferently. Eastern Divine Prefecture, Great Xia Jiming Marquis, Ning Chen said slowly. The sacred land said that the Eastern Divine Prefecture intended to invade the 4 extremes. Is it true? Meng Xuanji narrowed her eyes and asked. You're just confusing the truth, Ning Chen replied. I want to hear the truth, Meng Xuanji said seriously. Ning Chen seriously told her the truth, including what he had seen at the peak of the 9 heavens. Peak of the 9 heavens. Meng Xuanji frowned. I will personally verify what you say. If you're lying, then even if we're thousands of miles apart, the separation and reunion death seal in your body will make you pay the price. After she finished speaking, Meng Xuanji took a step forward. Her robe fluttered as she ascended into the sky. Be careful of the Disaster King and the Master of the 4 Extremes. If you don't want the 2 realms to go to war, then you can't let the golden feathertail fall into their hands, Ning Chen reminded her. Meng Xuanji didn't reply. She disappeared in the first rays of the morning sun. Next to the stream, Ning Chen's expression gradually turned cold. He looked to the east, his killing intent sharp. Elder Chu returned to Li Yan and whispered a few words into his ear, causing the latter to unconsciously frown. Let's not worry about that for now. Once the forging is complete, we'll discuss it further, said Li Yan. There were less than 4 hours left. Soon, the Lihua dynasty's plan would succeed. Elder Chu nodded and stood to the side, cautiously waiting. Within the Lihua imperial city, a white-robed figure descended from the sky. Her spiritual sense filled the entire imperial city, and her powerful aura shocked all the martial artists present. Ning Chen was searching for Li Youwei's figure. At this moment, the knowing destiny sword trembled intensely as if it had sensed something. Within Lihua Valley, a pure white saber was completely formed on the forging table. The earth blacksmith's tired eyes burned with passion. This was the most glorious masterpiece of his life. He had forged countless weapons in his life, and he was especially skilled in sabers and swords. However, he had already forged a perfect sword. He wouldn't forge another one in his life. The moment the saber was completed, thunderclouds suddenly appeared in the sky, blocking out the sun. The entire sky darkened. Thunder rumbled and lightning flashed. Elder Chu and Elder Li gathered their qi together, blocking the heavenly tribulation. The divine weapon floating in the air emitted a shocking aura. The saber had been fused with over 10 kinds of divine materials. It was pure white and flawless. It was so sharp that no one dared to look directly at it. Seeing that his karmic weapon had finally succeeded, Li Yan couldn't conceal his wild joy. Finally, he would become the #1 person in the Lihua dynasty's history. On the side, Li Yue's eyes also flashed with gratification. After working so hard for so long, the Lihua dynasty had finally taken the most important step. However, at this moment, a figure stained with blood slowly walked over. The knowing destiny sword in her hand trembled more and more violently. The blood in the green was exceptionally dazzling. The divine weapon in the air was also affected and began to hum. With the green jade as the core, the twin weapons were connected, and their light soared into the sky. Seeing this person, Li Yan's smile instantly vanished. He couldn't understand why this person would appear here. Chapter 256. His clothes fluttered in the wind, and the bloodstains were dazzling. The figure walking over was filled with killing intent, shocking everyone present. Li Yue immediately sensed that something was wrong. She stepped forward and blocked his path. Unexpectedly, a pair of emotionless hands arrived in an instant and locked onto the woman's delicate neck. His eyes were as cold as ice, threatening to take one's soul away. The murderous intent that filled the sky condensed in the void. An ancient giant beast manifested, a mutated rock roared towards the sky, its momentum shaking the heavens. At the same time, thunder rolled in the horizon, turning into a raging torrent that descended. Something happened to Jiangxin. Do you know? The voice was excessively calm, but Li Yue felt the aura of death. Under the lightning, the cold gaze was so unfamiliar. It was completely different from the man in her impression of him. On the forging table, the craftsman trembled when he heard this. He looked at the young man in disbelief. How could this be? It wasn't me, Li Yue said with difficulty. Then who do you think it was? The calm voice didn't contain any belief or disbelief. There was only coldness. This was her last chance. If she answered incorrectly, she would die. The calmness in the midst of extreme anger was only because of a trace of friendship in the past. However, compared to Jiangxin's life and death, this bit of friendship could only be explained in one sentence. A person suddenly flashed through Li Yue's mind. She immediately revealed a look of disbelief. How could the person she trusted the most be him? The final explanation was about to come out of her mouth, but she swallowed it back down. Li Yue was filled with regret and disappointment. The brother who had protected and supported her since childhood had betrayed her trust this time. You don't have an explanation? Killing intent flowed through Ning Chen's eyes. He extended his right hand and the knowing destiny sword rapidly spun into his hand. Ning Chen, have mercy, the craftsman urgently shouted. Let her go. That letter was forged by my people. It has nothing to do with Yue, said Li Yan indifferently. Ning Chen released his left hand and Li Yue fell to the ground powerlessly. Although she wasn't injured, she was suppressed by the strong killing intent and couldn't summon any strength. No! Li Yue reached out to stop him, but she could only pull on the corner of his clothes. She couldn't stop him at all. Elder Li and Elder Chu blocked the front. They were on full alert and their expressions were extremely grave. One was in the middle stage of the third tribulation, while the other was in the peak stage of the second tribulation. The two most powerful consecrators of the Li Fire imperial family worked together to protect the emperor. Little brother Ning, for the sake of our past friendship, everything can be discussed, old Li quickly said from his wheelchair. Sentiments? Ha! Ning Chen smiled coldly and walked forward step by step. Amidst the cold wind, the killing intent around him intensified. In the canyon, the rock's cry shook the sky, as if it was going to swallow the sky. Chu Jiang, quickly take his majesty away, shouted Elder Li when he saw Chu Jiang's killing intent. Chu Jiang did not waste any more time. He walked to Li Yan's side and was about to leave with him. At this time, Li Yan also sensed that something was wrong. He angrily said, What are you afraid of? Can't the two of you beat him alone? Chu Jiang didn't have time to explain as he sped away with Li Yan. Only he and Elder Li, who had reached the Khanate stage, could feel how terrifying the young man before him was. They were no longer on the same level. Even his will to resist was shaken. Without my permission, no one is allowed to leave today. Raising his hand, sword intent surged. The rock let out a long cry, and its wings trembled. A terrifying killing intent pressed down. Boundless sword intent spiraled out, turning into clouds that filled the sky. Chu Jiang was shaken. He had no choice but to turn back. But the sound of swords falling filled the air. Everything had been destroyed. The power of just one move shocked everyone. How could there be such a powerful youth in this world? Elderly didn't dare hesitate any longer. He was the first to attack, giving the two of them a chance to escape. Since you helped me forge my sword in the past, I'll spare your life for today's offense. Ning Chen's merciless words were the last bit of mercy. He moved around Elderly and arrived behind him in a single step. His merciful sword didn't slash down. Instead, it instantly arrived in front of Li Yan and Chu Jiang. His sword finger condensed into frost, and his sword broke through Li Yan's qi. Chu Jiang, who was beside Li Yan, didn't even have time to react. By the time he regained his senses, his eyes were already covered in blood. Ugh! With a long groan of extreme pain, Li Yan's sea of qi was instantly broken. Chaotic genuine qi spilled out from every part of his body. Blood spurted out and splattered all over the sky. Chu Jiang was startled. He raised his hand to slap Ning Chen, but he was sent flying by a single finger. Swish! At this moment, a white saber light flashed behind him. It was bright and powerful. It was shocking to the extreme. Ning Chen's eyes turned cold. He leaned to the side and swung his sword. With a clang, he blocked the saber light behind him. Elderly, who was sitting in a wheelchair, held his karmic weapon. He used all his cultivation to activate his divine weapon, doing his best to save his master. The pure white saber was dazzling. Its sharpness was close to the golden feather centipede. My mercy to you isn't the right to let you be impudent. Back down! Shouted Ning Chen coldly. The life-knowing sword in Ning Chen's hand blossomed with a brilliant light. It sent the old man flying. The divine weapon that flew out of his hand fell to the side and buzzed incessantly. Due to the huge difference in strength, even the support of the divine weapon was useless. Li Yan, who was lying in a pool of blood, looked at the two consecrators who had been defeated. His mouth opened, but he could no longer speak due to the pain. If he had known this would happen, would he have made the decision back then? The emperor asked his heart. His heart was at a loss. Ning Chen waved his hand and grabbed the divine weapon. He looked at the figure on the ground and said coldly, "Is this why you betrayed your heart?" Seeing the divine weapon fall into the hands of the person in front of him, a hint of struggle flashed in Li Yan's eyes. However, his crippled body couldn't move. He could only watch helplessly as the divine weapon fell. Sigh. On the weapon forging table, the earth craftsman sighed softly and didn't say another word. He had failed to live up to the trust entrusted to him. What right did he have to plead for mercy? Li Yue crawled in front of the two of them with great difficulty. She tugged at the plain white clothes that were completely stained with blood, and her eyes were filled with pleading as she said, "Ning Chen, even if royal brother was wrong, you've already crippled his cultivation. For Yue's sake, please spare his life. If you do something wrong, you have to pay the price. A life for a life is my bottom line. Don't make me lose my last bit of rationality." Ning Chen waved his hand and pushed Li Yue away. He picked up Li Yan and turned into a ray of light. "Chase after him," Li Yue urged anxiously. Chu Jiang and Elderly immediately turned into rays of light and chased after him together with Li Yue. On the weapon forging table, the earth craftsman walked down silently. His heart was very complicated. The world was unpredictable. Who would have thought that things would develop to this point? It was just a slight mistake, but the result was the difference between heaven and earth. The Lihua dynasty's 100-year plan was ruined at the moment of success. On Half Moon Mountain, a figure in plain clothes flew over. The man in his hand had his hair dyed red and blood dripped from his body. He was extremely miserable. The ruler of a dynasty had fallen to this point. Was he a tiger that had fallen to the plains, or was he asking for it? Who could judge? It was just like General Xian who had been betrayed. If it weren't for a master who loved her, who would have thought of her after falling to the dust? Being weak meant not having the right to choose. Being weak meant being bullied, being betrayed, and unable to resist. The killing intent in Ning Chen's eyes was so thick that it could not be dispersed. He hated Li Yan, but he hated himself even more. He had taught her how to cultivate her heart and how to treat others with her heart, but he hadn't taught her how to guard against others. As a master, he had failed in his duty. Half Moon Mountain was a bottomless cliff. Clouds and mist curled around it, making it impossible to see what was below. Even Xiantian cultivators couldn't see through the cliff, so how could it possibly be 10,000 feet tall? General Xian was only at the 6th grade of the natal realm, and she had been poisoned first. If she fell, she would definitely die. With a flash of light, Ning Chen appeared at the edge of the cliff. Looking down, a rare trace of pain flashed through his eyes. In his life, he was rarely willing to give his feelings because he couldn't bear it anymore. Meeting General Xian was just an accident. Later on, he felt her persistence and admired her martial spirit. Only then did he have the heart to teach her. Since he had acknowledged the existence of General Xian, he used all his efforts to teach her. Day by day, he watched the little girl who was as quiet as a little beast grow up. Although he had never told anyone, the gratification in his heart truly existed. His dream of family was shattered. His black hair, still dyed with blood, fluttered in the cold wind. Ning Chen carried Li Yan and stood at the edge of the cliff, unable to speak for a long time. Your Majesty. Ning Chen. Chu Jiang, elderly, and Li Yuwei caught up. Looking at the figure at the edge of the cliff, they anxiously called out. Li Yuwei's teary eyes were pleading. She was pleading for her brother's last chance to live. No matter what he did wrong, as his sister, how could she watch him die? Ning Chen looked at the pleading Li Yuwei and thought of Xia Zi and Xia Xinyu. He also thought of Wild and Crown Prince Man, who didn't give him any face because of his sister. It seemed that the imperial family wasn't as filthy as he had imagined. Brotherly love was always the most precious and rare emotion. If he had done something wrong, perhaps Ning Shi would have done the same. Letting go of his hand represented the final judgment. The figure that fell down the cliff disappeared in the blink of an eye. Imperial brother. After so many days of nervousness and today's sudden change, Li Yuwei vomited a mouthful of blood and fainted. Chu Jiang and Elder Li's figures flashed. They wanted to go down the cliff to save her, but they were forced back by a sword. The price of betrayal could only be repaid with their lives. Ning Chen sighed at Li Yuwei's feelings for her brother. But he still wouldn't show any mercy. If he showed mercy, who would show mercy to General Xian? The cold sword was unshakable. The blood in the green was glaring. Sliver by sliver, it sealed the two's hope. At this moment, a figure flew out from below the cliff. He was carrying Li Yan, who had fallen down the cliff. Seeing the plainclothed young man at the edge of the cliff, a strange expression flashed across his face. It's you. It's you. The two pairs of eyes were cold. Knowing destiny and Qingyue moved at the same time. The moment they clashed, they stopped at the same time. It wasn't that their hostility had dissipated. It was that they had appeared here. Jiang Hua was the peerless genius of the general family. He was a heaven's pride that lived under praise and reverence. He shouldn't have come here, but he had unexpectedly appeared. Was it brotherly love? Perhaps it was. For more than 10 years, no one had ever seen Jiang Hua say anything about the injustice that Jiang Xian had suffered. Even after he became the head of the family, he still held an indifferent attitude. Gradually, many people, including Jiang Xian herself, began to forget that this dazzling son of the general family had a younger sister by the name of Jiang Xian, and not the shame of the general family, Jiang Xian. Chapter 257. At the edge of Half Moon Cliff, the coldness in their eyes gradually faded. Jiang Xian hasn't died yet, said Jiang Hua. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes. How was that possible? I can't save her by myself. I need help, said Jiang Hua. I'll go with you. Ning Chen didn't hesitate. His figure flashed and he jumped into the cliff. Did you throw him down? How should we deal with him? Asked Jiang Hua calmly as he looked at Li Yan. Ning Chen grabbed Li Yan and a snow-white sword condensed in his hand. With a wave of his hand, the snow-white sword pierced through Li Yan's body and nailed him to the cliff. Let's go. After doing all this, Ning Chen called out and jumped down the cliff. Soon, he disappeared from sight. Jiang Hua glanced at Li Yan nailed to the cliff. What a ruthless method. In the next 3 days, this person would truly experience what it meant to live a life worse than death. However, Jiang Hua did not care about this. He moved his feet and quickly followed. On Half Moon Cliff, Chu Jiang panicked when he saw Li Yan in danger. He was about to help. But just as he was about to approach, a surge of sword intent spread out and Chu Jiang was immediately sent flying. Ugh! A painful groan resounded through Half Moon Cliff. The sword intent spread out and entered Li Yan's meridians. His entire body was in pain and his blood dyed the cliff red. Your Majesty! Chu Jiang panicked. Elder Li immediately stopped him from continuing. Don't be rash, or His Majesty will suffer even more. Then what should we do? Asked Chu Jiang. Wait. Elder Li slowly said. The sword intent of the observing snow sword should disperse in 3 days. Before that, they could only pray that His Majesty would be able to endure. On the cliff, the blood-covered figure's consciousness was gradually fading. Blood dripped down his clothes drop by drop. This was the merciless call of death. Although the people on the cliff wanted to help, they were powerless. They could only watch as Li Yan's life force slowly disappeared from his body. At the bottom of the cliff, 2 silhouettes appeared. Ning Chen looked around at the fog-shrouded area, and a glint flashed in his eyes. Be careful. This place is much more dangerous than you imagined, warned Jiang Hua. Yes. Ning Chen responded. Just as he took a step forward, the knowing destiny sword in his right hand suddenly trembled. The blood pattern on the sword lit up and connected with his blood vessels. In the blink of an eye, it merged back into his body. Is it time? Ning Chen frowned as he sensed the dormant sword in his body. This sword had yet to be fully matured. Now that it had been forcefully reborn, he did not know how long it would take for it to recover. Jiang Hua also noticed this and asked, Can you still fight without your sword? It's fine, please lead the way. Ning Chen calmly replied. Jiang Hua didn't say anything more. He stepped forward and walked into the depths of the fog. Ning Chen followed and walked forward with him. The fog in the air was getting thicker and thicker. Gradually, the innate spirit sense couldn't sense things too far away. It was severely restricted. On the road ahead, the pressure grew stronger and stronger, and the two of them became more and more cautious. Time passed bit by bit. The blazing sun moved westward, and the day was coming to an end. The fog in the valley grew thicker and thicker. All of a sudden, sword lights appeared above the two of them. They were bone-chilling and fell silently. Clang! The two divine weapons faced each other. Moonlight flickered. Now that they had been reborn, they were completely different from the last battle. They seemed to have gained something else, and their spirituality was overwhelming. The weapon of providence in Ning Chen's hand shone with a flawless white light. When he swung his saber, space shrieked and a glaring crack appeared. When the saber and sword clashed, the two of them both took several steps back. This was just the first clash, and they were already at a disadvantage. What is it? Ning Chen frowned and asked. I don't know. Jiang Hua's expression was grave. There were no records of such dangers below Half Moon Cliff. If he had not come down once, he would also know nothing about it. Sword lights flashed through the fog. The two of them used their sabers to resist. After fighting for a long time, they still couldn't find their opponent's aura. Buy me some time. I'll disperse this fog. Ning Chen shouted and turned his saber. Silver light shone brightly around him. Jiang Hua understood and spun his saber rapidly. Saber lights soared into the sky, turning the area 10 meters around the two of them into a forbidden zone. Clanging sounds rang out incessantly, but none of the swords could break through the saber lights and get within 10 meters of the two of them. The life scroll was circulated to its limit. Surging cold air quickly spread out, and the surrounding fog turned into raindrops. In an instant, everything became clear. There was no longer any fog obstructing their vision. Around the two of them, 12 swords of different shapes circled around them. Their sword lights were eerie and frightening. Jiang Hua, where are you? Ning Chen asked as he swung his saber and knocked away the incoming sword lights. Jiang Hua cut his finger and used his blood as a guide to form many complicated hand seals. A moment later, a faint blood-red light soared into the sky from the depths of the eastern valley, reflecting in front of the two of them. You go and save them first, Ning Chen quickly said as he flipped his palm and forcefully grabbed a sword. Yes. Jiang Hua did not waste any more words. He quickly rushed toward the eastern valley. 6 of the 11 sword lights wanted to chase after him. However, the saber and sword hummed together. Saber lights appeared from the sky and blocked all the attacks. At this moment, Jiang Hua's figure was already far away and disappeared into the valley. After Jiang Hua left, Ning Chen forcefully activated his martial arts to destroy the remaining consciousness in the swords. The next moment, his martial senses were raised to the limit, and he fought against the 11 sword lights with all his strength. The battle was fierce and intense. At this moment, in the depths of the valley, there was the same earth-shattering sound of the formation. The strange situation was difficult to understand. Ning Chen was worried about the safety of Jiang Hua in the valley. He held his saber and sword together, 9 of them attacking and 1 of them defending. He wanted to break out of the formation as soon as possible. There were new wounds on his plain clothes. The 11 sword lights were unusually sharp and came and went without a trace. It was as if 11 upper sky realm experts were working together. It was overwhelming. The saber light and sword intent were drowned by the sword lights. In the depths of the valley, Jiang Hua was also covered in blood and was seriously injured. This was an unrecorded primitive place. As soon as it showed its ferocious power, the 2 peerless geniuses in the world were surrounded by danger. Scroll of Heaven, absolve heaven of innocence. At this moment, among the layers of sword lights, the heavenly book moved that had never appeared in the world rose. He held his sword in reverse and turned his saber rapidly. The blue brilliance reflected the last remnants of the sun and turned into a skyrocketing light that slashed down. Crack, crack. The 11 swords around him were broken. The broken swords scattered all over the sky. Ning Chen staggered. The extreme move triggered the injury that he had not recovered from yesterday. He spat out a mouthful of blood. His saber and sword fell to the ground. The blood was dazzling. Jiang Xin. Ning Chen stood up with difficulty. A stream of light flashed and rushed to the depths of the valley where the fierce battle was taking place. The sun set and the moon rose. In the depths of the valley, the thick fog rose again. The sound of the battle shook the world. The light of the saber and sword vibrated everywhere, destroying the entire valley. Jiang Hua's body was covered in blood. Especially on his right arm, there was a deep wound that showed the bone. He was seriously injured. The figure opposite him had a leopard's body and a dragon's head. Its huge body was red and dazzling. It held a red sword in its mouth. The flames on the sword were rising. Yazi! Ning Chen looked at the beast in front of him. His body shook and he was in disbelief. A leopard's body and a dragon's head. It held a sword in its mouth. It had fierce eyes. All the characteristics showed that the beast was the second son of the dragon, Yazi. In the distance, 3 waterfalls fell into the pool below. Affected by the scorching temperature, the water in the pool evaporated unceasingly. White fog curled up and quickly filled the air. Through the fog, an unconscious figure could be seen floating in the pool. The red light was faintly discernible. It was already very weak. After Ning Chen saw it, his body moved quickly. He quickly rushed to the pool. Roar! A sky-shaking roar echoed. The red sword flew out of Yazi's mouth. With a loud bang, it fell from the sky. Ning Chen used his sword to fight against the sword. However, he felt a wave of fire in his face. The ground below him was instantly scorched. The Qing Yu was sharp. It streaked across the sky like a stream of light. However, the dragon's head swallowed and spat out red lightning. With a loud bang, Jianghua was blown away. Feelings of snow. Frost surged. The sword light soared into the sky. It went against the wind and snow. It fought the beast bravely. The swords collided. Ning Chen suppressed the injuries in his body. The sword spirit circled around his body. The silver light blossomed in the wind and snow. It was exceptionally dazzling. Jianghua also activated his martial arts. His sword spirit was awakened from the Qingyu. The moonlight shone from the 9 heavens. The 2 moons were in the sky, competing with each other for glory. The 2 prides fought against Yazi. It was an unparalleled ancient mythological beast. It was infinitely close to the humans' 3 disasters. In addition to its innate talent, it was terrifyingly powerful. The 2 of them were both dyed red. However, because of the figure in the pool, neither of them retreated half a step. On the half-moon cliff, the cold wind rustled. The cold moon from the east sprinkled on the ground. Between the broken cliffs, Li Yan was nailed to the cliff by the snow sword. There was not much vitality left in his body. On the cliff, Elder Li was waiting silently. He was completely powerless. Chu Jiang brought the unconscious Li Yuwei back to the palace. It was not only to heal her injuries, but also to stabilize the situation in the court. The country could not be without a ruler. Li Yan suffered such a great disaster. The possibility of him surviving was less than 1 in 10. Even if he did not die, he would be crippled. It was impossible for him to rule the Lihua dynasty. Although it was cruel, it was an irreversible fact. For the sake of the Lihua dynasty, it was unavoidable to choose a new ruler. However, Li Yan only had 1 son. He was not even 5 years old. Even if he ascended the throne, it would be difficult for him to rule. The worst thing was that Duke Muyang had a large number of troops and the sacred land behind him. He was a great threat to the new emperor. Chu Jiang and Elder Li did not know much about the matters in the court, so they could only leave it to Li Yuwei. Fortunately, the court did not know what happened to Li Yan, giving them some time to prepare. At this moment, the red light gathered and a blood-red figure walked out. Looking at the half-moon cliff that had been destroyed beyond recognition by the great battle, a glint flashed in his eyes. Elder Li felt the aura behind him and his body turned cold. He turned his wheelchair around and saw a red figure with red hair and red clothes. The powerful pressure he gave off was not any weaker than the previous 2. Is this the place? Duan Fengchen did not pay attention to the person in front of him. He murmured and the red figure disappeared again. The figure rushed down the cliff. When he saw the person nailed to the cliff, his eyes narrowed. However, he did not make a move. The familiar sword intent was as sharp as before. This was a sword that could not be broken, not even him. The red figure quickly disappeared and only the person nailed to the cliff was left. The cold wind blew and the scene was bleak. There was no technique or sword intent, only the most powerful power. It was as heavy as Mount Tai, and it was difficult for a human to shake it. Heaven Scroll, eh? Ning Chen was about to use the heavenly book martial arts again when suddenly, his qi and blood stagnated and he vomited. The after effects of the continuous battles were finally beginning to show themselves. First, he had barged into the spatial turbulence and fought against the Disaster King for almost 2 months. Then, because something happened to Jiang Xian, he was besieged by the Disaster King and several powerhouses from the Holy Land. His body had not been able to recover in time, and now, he had to fight against the 3 disasters-level vicious beasts again. His body was full of injuries, and it was difficult for him to continue. On the other side, Jiang Hua was not much better. When he went down the cliff alone to save people, he was already injured. Now, he was even more injured. He tried to break through the Yazi's defense several times, but he was forced back by the lightning and fire. He could not advance, but he was also unwilling to retreat. The 2 blades stopped at this moment. Facing the 3 disasters, the 2 tribulation geniuses with incomplete bodies were now in the most dangerous situation. They could not retreat, nor did they dare to retreat. This was because the aura in the pool was getting weaker and weaker. If they retreated now, they might not have another chance. Am I late? At this moment, a red figure appeared in the distance. After a few steps, it arrived in the middle of the battle. You're not late. There's still time to collect its corpse. Jiang Huaidao pushed away the scarlet sword and retreated several steps. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and replied. Ha! Luan Fengchen waved his hand, and a flowing blood blade appeared. The slender blade flashed with a brilliant light, and he slashed at the Yazi. Roar! An angry roar shook the heavens. The Yazi opened its mouth and spat out a bolt of lightning mixed with scorching flames. It charged straight at the red figure. With a bang, the flowing blood blade slashed through the lightning and landed on the Yazi's head. But with a loud bang, the dragon's head remained unharmed. The dragon opened its mouth again, and Luan Fengchen hurriedly retreated, avoiding the lightning. He glanced at the 2 covered in blood and said, I can't believe you can last this long against such a monster. Cut the crap. Jiang Xian can't hold on any longer. I didn't call you here to listen to your nonsense. Jiang Hua's expression became even more solemn. Compared to the first time he had come down, Jiang Xian's aura was much weaker. It seemed like it could disappear at any moment. Life Scroll. Ning Chen flipped his palm and condensed his qi. He forcefully circulated his body, and cold qi immediately spread out, filling the entire valley. For a time, the surrounding temperature rapidly dropped. The pool and waterfall rapidly froze at a visible speed, turning into a world of ice crystals. Within the pool, Jiang Xian's aura was already drifting. The cyclone within his body was pulled by the life scroll, and it began to rotate bit by bit, slowly healing his injuries. Seeing this, the Yazi let out a furious roar. The red light around its body became even brighter, and the world of ice collapsed. Ning Chen suffered a backlash and vomited a mouthful of blood. He suddenly staggered. Hurry up. I can't keep her alive for too long. Ning Chen couldn't care less about his injuries. His figure flashed quickly, and the weapon of providence shone again. The pure white blade slashed across, and a brilliant light shone. Jiang Hua and Luan Fengchen didn't say anything else. Qing Yu and Flowing Blood Blade pushed themselves to their limits and charged forward. The 3 geniuses used their full strength. The 3 blades' light covered the moon in the sky, and their sharp auras caused the flames around them to collapse. For the first time, they seemed to be evenly matched. The Yazi's ferocious aura was limitless. Its furious roars shook the heavens and earth, and terrifying sound waves spread out. Flames and lightning spewed out, and the red sword danced in the flames, trapping the 3 geniuses. In order to save Jiang Xian, Ning Chen and Jiang Hua pushed their battle intent to the limit. They suppressed the pain in their bodies, and their blazing battle souls lit up the world. Luan Fengchen was at his peak. Adding on the fact that he had taken back his own blade, his battle strength had greatly increased. In order to cooperate with the two, he also pushed his cultivation to the peak. The three geniuses fought the Yazi, and the blade light fought the sword. The scorched earth rumbled and was swept up by the powerful aura, turning into a 100-meter-long sandstorm. Rivers and mountains drink hatred, blood maples October red. Luan Fengchen used his ultimate skill for the first time. The slender blood blade shone brightly, and an endless amount of blood-colored light rose up. It was like the October maples, and red light covered the sky. Moon shadow. With the help of Jiang Huaxian blade, the moonlight scattered and the moon disappeared. In the next moment, where the moonlight shone, a flowing shadow appeared out of thin air and slashed down. The two geniuses' ultimate skills were unparalleled. They directly cut through the flames and lightning, and landed on the Yazi's body. With a loud bang, the Yazi roared and retreated a few steps. Drops of beast blood dripped from its head. It was the first time it had been injured. At that moment, Ning Chen's body moved. He raised his hand and pointed. His sword intent shone brightly. In the midst of the falling snowflakes, a snow-colored sword condensed. The sword followed Ning Chen and arrived in front of the Yazi in an instant. At the same time, the red sword appeared. Flames surged as it slashed down with the power to break the sky. Ning Chen did not care about the incoming sword. He gathered all of his power into the sword. Immediately, the wind and snow became like a wave. It actually suppressed the endless sea of flames in an instant. The sword intent roared and a dazzling silver light gathered. It went through the Yazi's wound and directly penetrated its body. With a shocking roar, the red sword fell at the same time. Bai Yi flew out and blood splattered all over the sky. The dust gradually dispersed. The figure kneeling on the ground was bleeding like a fountain, dyeing the ground in front of him red. Ning Chen's left shoulder and arm had a terrifying sword wound. The broken bones of his arm could be faintly seen. It was extremely eye-catching. "How are you?" Jiang Hua rushed over and grabbed Ning Chen. He retreated 30 meters and asked. "Don't worry about me. Cherish this opportunity." Ning Chen pushed Jiang Hua away and staggered to his feet. His right hand grasped the blade that was originally in his left hand. He forcefully endured his injuries and withdrew the wind and snow around him. The heavenly scroll rose again. It rose endlessly and shone brightly in the night. Jiang Hua and Luan Fengchen focused their minds. Their blades resonated and two blade intents surged out, illuminating the moonlit night. The heavily injured Yazi roared furiously. Its aura flickered. Waves of fire spread out. It was extremely ferocious. The three blade lights worked together to break the ferocious aura. The red sword slashed down. Jiang Hua was the first to be sent flying. Behind him, Luan Fengchen cut through the waves of fire. Raging thunder rushed past and also retreated a dozen steps. Finally, Ning Chen condensed his chi with his heavenly scroll. The heavenly scroll's moves were pushed to the limit. His blade light soared into the sky and gathered the last of his strength. With a loud explosion, the Yazi's body crashed into the ground. Sand and stones flew everywhere. Seeing an opening, Jiang Hua's figure flashed and arrived at the pond behind the Yazi. He grabbed Jiang Xian and quickly flew back. However, at that moment, the Yazi faced the sky and roared. Its ferocious aura shook the heaven and earth. Thunder and fire filled the sky like a storm. Its destructive power made the three's expressions change. "Take Jiang Xian and leave." At the critical moment, Ning Chen shouted anxiously. He flipped his palm and forcefully activated the original aura in his body. In an instant, lightning, frost, and wind surged out in the air. Along with the surging blood mist, it turned the area around him into a blood-red world. Jiang Hua did not hesitate. He stepped on the air and quickly left with Jiang Xian. What a hateful aura! Luan Fengchen's expression was cold. His flowing light blood blade rose up. He used his ultimate move to resist the Yazi's attack. In that instant, the entire Half-Moon Canyon collapsed. Two streams of blood flew out from the sand. After landing, they were still unable to withstand the huge force and were forced back dozens of steps. "Let's go." Luan Feng Chen's figure flashed and she arrived at Ning Chen's side. She supported the exhausted Ning Chen and quickly left. The cold moon hung high in the sky. On the other side of Half Moon Cliff, three figures appeared. They all coughed up a mouthful of blood and staggered. "Next time there's a loss like this, don't call me again." Luan Fengchen wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth and bitterly smiled. "Ah, we're friends. There's no need to be so calculative." Jiang Hua put down Jiang Xian and turned his palm to heal her, but he was stopped by a hand. "Her cultivation technique is special. Let me do it." Ning Chen took a step forward. "Your body?" Jiang Hua asked with a frown. "It's fine. I can still hold on." Ning Chen nodded and walked forward. He raised his hand and frost filled the sky. The life scroll's radiance was dazzling. Heaven and earth's spiritual qi entered his body and transformed into boundless true qi that poured into Jiang Xian's body. As time passed, General Jiang Xian's severely damaged body gradually recovered and his expression returned to its normal state. The three of them stopped, each looking exhausted. Jiang Xian slowly opened her eyes as well. When she saw the familiar figure in front of her, she subconsciously called out, "Master." A trace of gratification appeared in Ning Chen's eyes. In the next moment, his crippled body could no longer support itself. He staggered a step and fell forward. "Master!" Startled, Jiang immediately came back to his senses and supported the former. Just now, he saw that his master was covered in blood and his almost crippled left arm. "Return to the general family's saber tomb." Jiang Hua helped the two of them over. His figure flashed as he turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the distance. Luan Feng Chen's feet moved and a red shadow scattered as she followed behind. Half a day later, in the general family's saber tomb, Bai Yi lay quietly on a stone platform. Around her were ancient sabers gently swaying, flowing with the aura of time. The saber tomb was a forbidden area of the general family. It contained the sabers of all the elders and above of the general family for thousands of years. Some had been corroded by time and some had not been damaged even after thousands of years. The location of the general family's saber tomb was very secretive. Only the general family's patriarch of each generation knew about it. Coupled with the concealment of the formation, even innate masters would have a hard time finding it. Ning Chen's injuries were too severe, especially the sword wound from his left shoulder to his left arm. The flame qi had almost destroyed all the bones and meridians in his arm. It would take more than a day or two to recover. In the saber tomb, Jiang Hua and Luan Fengchen had already recovered from their injuries. Jiang Xian silently guarded Ning Chen's side. Since returning, she had not said a word. Jiang Hua came to check on her several times. When he saw Jiang Xian silently guarding her, he sighed in his heart and did not disturb her. 4 days later, Ning Chen woke up. Jiang Xian was startled at first, but then her tears fell like rain. She immediately threw herself into Ning Chen's embrace and cried. Ning Chen smiled tiredly and rubbed the girl's hair. He softly said, "All right, don't cry." Hearing the commotion, Jiang Hua quickly rushed over. They looked at each other seriously for the first time and then spoke at the same time. "Many thanks. Many thanks." What were they thanking for? Although the two of them said it, they didn't know what to thank. One was Jiang Xian's master and the other was Jiang Xian's brother. This was something they should do. Luan Fengchen also walked over and stood not far away, silently waiting for an answer. Ning Chen gently pushed the girl away and stood up. He looked at the red-robed youth in front of him and spoke of his origin. Eastern Divine Province, Grand Xia Jiming Marquis. Holy Son of the Four-Level Holy Sun. Luan Fengchen also did not hide anything. Ning Chen waved his hand and a drop of phoenix blood flew out. It shone with a red light and traces of powerful vitality spread out. This is phoenix blood. A familiar aura floated in front of him. Luan Fengchen's expression finally changed. Wrong, it was all wrong. Phoenix blood was something only the Long Life Palace had. That person also had this aura. However, he had not gone back for a long time and had gradually forgotten about it. He still remembered the first time they met on the Nine Cloud Mountains Jade Pearl Peak. He had felt that this person in front of him was familiar, but he hadn't remembered. Now, he finally knew that this was the aura of Phoenix blood. Before that, only the Calamity King of the Long Life Palace had Phoenix blood. Eastern Divine Province, there is a place called Ascension Valley. The story wasn't long. Ning Chen calmly told it while the three listened. The more they listened, the more silent they became. The truth was always cruel and hard to accept. There were no strict boundaries between who was right and who was wrong. Only the human heart could judge. I'm going back to the sacred land. With that, Luan Fengchen turned and left. His red hair and clothes fluttered in the wind. At this moment, he was no longer as free and easy as before. He was shackled and gradually sank. He had believed him, but he had been wrong. He had lied to him once again. 10 years of kindness. He had taught him martial arts, the Tao, and how to be a person. But now, he found that he could no longer see through him. Under the moonlight, the red figure carried a heavy weight. With a gust of cold wind, he disappeared. Your injury? Jiang Hua asked. It's fine. Ning Chen shook his head and interrupted the former. Master. Jiang Xian's face was still tear-stained. Ning Chen wiped away the tears on her face and said softly, Jiang Xian, practice martial arts well in the future. Listen to your brother's teachings. Remember, your master is #1 in the world. You are her disciple. You won't lose to anyone. Master, where are you going? I'll go with you. Jiang Xian panicked when she heard her master say goodbye. She grabbed his arm and refused to let go. Jiang Xian, your master has his own matters to attend to. Don't throw a tantrum. Jiang Hua advised. A smile appeared on Ning Chen's face. In the end, he rubbed the girl's hair. Then, he pushed her hands away and walked away. In the past, she couldn't have it, so he could only keep her by his side. Now that she had it, how could he stop her? As a master, he always hoped that she could obtain more. That way, he could be at ease. Jiang Xian couldn't stop herself. She squatted there and cried. Those who heard her felt an indescribable bitterness in their hearts. Jiang Hua stood to the side and silently waited. He didn't dare to say anything. Ning Chen continued north and didn't look back even once. When he first heard Jiang Hua's name, he didn't have a good impression of him. No matter how dazzling he was, someone who couldn't even protect his younger sister was still shameful. Later, after the battle at the Jiang family, Jiang Hua rushed back from outside. The first time they met, it was a life-and-death battle. At that time, there was no nonsense to be said. There was only a life-and-death battle. After that, they met on Half Moon Cliff. Their first reaction was to fight with swords. After calming down, they guessed each other's intentions. During the battle with the Yazi, both he and Jiang Hua's martial arts weren't complete. They were surrounded by danger. Seeing the unshakable might of the three disaster beasts and Jiang Hua still unwilling to retreat, he knew that this man was a good brother. Everyone had a different way of protecting. Perhaps it was just that outsiders didn't know. The cold moon had completely disappeared. The cold wind rustled. On Half Moon Cliff, Bai Yi gathered. She glanced at the empty cliff and turned to leave. He didn't die. He was really lucky. Rumor had it that the emperor was blessed with luck. As long as it wasn't a fatal situation, there would always be surprises. Now it seemed that the rumor wasn't false. Luck had existed since ancient times. There was a weapon in the Great Xia Palace that suppressed luck. The reason why the Great Xia dynasty was invincible for thousands of years was because of this weapon. It wasn't hard to guess the use of the sword in his hand. When the weapon was being forged, Li Yan, Li Yue, and 2 other innate experts were present. This already explained a lot. In addition, the Lihua royal family wasn't as loyal to the sacred ground as imagined. Li Yan risked the revenge of an innate expert to betray his heart to the sacred ground. The only explanation was that he wanted to divert the sacred ground's attention. And the rumors about him and his senior that were spreading around a few days ago should be Li Yue's doing. In the world, no divine weapon could make an emperor so nervous, unless this weapon was related to the country. However, what surprised him was that the Lihua royal family's weapon of destiny had just been forged. Then, in the past few hundred years, what was the weapon that suppressed the dynasty's luck? Who was it? In the past, he didn't think in this direction. Now that Li Yan and Li Yue gave him a hint, he couldn't waste such a good idea. In the earthly craftsman manner, there were no more clanking sounds. After forging the weapon, the earthly craftsman put down the hammer in his hand. Every day, he would just sweep the snow or plant a cold moon plum blossom in the courtyard. The cold wind blew a waterfall of snow. The snow hadn't completely fallen, but there was red in the snow. It was the blood on his clothes. Bai Yi appeared and walked into the courtyard. When the earthly craftsman saw the young man in front of him, his hand that was planting flowers paused. He said softly, "Sorry." Ning Chen didn't say anything. He waved his hand and a pure white sword appeared in front of him. He said, "I'm just here to ask. Is this the weapon of destiny?" The earthly craftsman was silent for a moment, then nodded and said, "Yes." "Name it," Ning Chen said calmly. "Nian Qing," the earthly craftsman said softly. "Ha!" Ning Chen turned around. When the snow fell, Bai Yi left. Bai Yi's figure flew higher and higher above the Li Fire Empire. He looked down at the entire Qingli city. The surrounding qi poured into the sword. In an instant, a dazzling white light bloomed in the sky, illuminating the entire horizon. In the next moment, the ground beneath the imperial palace shook. Vast amounts of purple qi rose into the sky. However, before it could fly, it seemed to be bound by something. It couldn't move even half a step forward. This shocking scene shook the entire imperial palace. Li Yue, Duke Muyang, and the imperial consecrators all sensed it and hastily walked out. "Is this it?" Ning Chen took a step forward and sped down. His falling momentum increased the power of his sword. With a slash of his sword, a huge crack appeared in space. It shocked everyone. Under the terrifying sword light, a majestic palace in the center of the imperial palace suddenly collapsed. An ancient bronze bell wailed and then exploded, filling the sky. Within the holy palace of the 4 extreme holy lands, a person's expression instantly changed. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked in the direction of the Li Fire Empire. When the ancient bell shattered, the Li Fire Empire's karmic luck that had been suppressed for hundreds of years flowed out like a spring. Ning Chen waved his hand, and white sword light flashed. He circulated his body, forcibly absorbing the karmic luck of the heavenly cycle into his sword. Thunder rumbled in the sky. The huge change that had occurred hundreds of years ago had appeared again today. Within the imperial palace, Li Yan seemed to sense something and woke up from his coma. His crippled body trembled powerlessly, but he couldn't change anything. The experts of the Holy Lands and the imperial consecrators of the Li Fire Empire rushed over, wanting to stop him. However, they were all blocked by the karmic luck. They couldn't get even half a step closer. Ning Chen. Li Yue rushed over. Looking at the figure within the lightning and purple qi, a trace of powerlessness flashed across her beautiful face. Without karmic luck, the Li Empire would be like cotton floating in the rain. It would be precarious. In his heart, did he really not care about friendship at all? Thunder rumbled, becoming more and more shocking. The moment all the purple chi was absorbed into the sword, it suddenly descended. Ning Chen swung his sword, splitting the sky. The lightning that filled the sky collapsed and dissipated. The pure white sword had now turned purple. Purple chi curled around it, appearing and disappearing at times. It was extremely shocking. The instant they brushed past each other, Ning Chen paused and calmly said, "Senior earthly craftsman said that this sword is called Remembrance. Do you think this name is correct?" Chapter 260. Hearing the question, Li Yue's body trembled. She wanted to beg him to show mercy, but she did not know how to say it. The figure that brushed past her eventually left. No one dared to stop him, and no one could stop him. In the cold wind, the bloodstains on her clothes were still so glaring. She could no longer raise her left arm. A word of gratitude was as light as a feather, but it was as heavy as Mount Tai. The past flashed before his eyes like reflections. There was joy, sorrow, kindness, and even the hatred of betrayal. Gradually, it faded, dispersed, and disappeared with the wind. At the last moment, the last words left by the person who left were vague and hard to understand. Li Yue's body shook. There was no joy in her heart, only the pain that she could not suppress. She bowed deeply. This was the last greeting she could give to the dynasty as the eldest princess. In the next moment, the white clothes vanished, vanishing into nothingness. 10 days later, the new emperor of the Lihua dynasty ascended the throne. A child who was not even 5 years old, the only bloodline of the royal family, ascended the throne. The new emperor was still young. In the past, the empress and the eldest princess ruled together. But everyone knew that from now on, the person in charge of the dynasty would be the beautiful figure behind the beaded curtain. Duke Muyang controlled a large number of troops and became the biggest variable. Especially after the new emperor ascended the throne, things started to become unstable. The 3 Khanate consecrators of the royal family became the biggest support of the Li dynasty. After the upheaval, Li Yue's personality changed a lot. She became more mature and diligent in political affairs. She no longer had the charming smile of the past. At the top of the 9 heavens, in the turbulence of space, Meng Xuanji was still approaching the sky screen. She was not far from the truth. Even though she believed most of what he said, she still wanted to take a look personally to make the final confirmation. In the 4 extremes sacred ground, in the sacred palace, an intense battle broke out. Red saber light illuminated the world. In the end, Hong Yi was heavily injured and escaped from the sacred ground. The master of the 4 extremes did not send anyone to chase after her and let Luan Fengchen leave. Half a day later, a young man in blue walked into the palace and knelt down respectfully. "Greetings, master." "Xian Ji, get ready," said the master of the 4 extremes. "Yes." Xian Ji bowed respectfully. His overly handsome face was expressionless as he got up and left. The experts of the sacred ground all bowed when they saw the blue figure walking out of the sacred palace. Many of them were at the 3rd tribulation of the Khanate tribulation. In the Holy Lands, strength was everything. There was only one exception, and that was the person in front of him. A 2nd-grade Khanate realm cultivation wasn't outstanding. However, Xian Ji was the person with the highest status in the 4 extremities realm other than the State Lord and the Holy Sun. The 100-year-old plan, the overt and covert arrangements, and the plan to massacre the sects were all made by the person in front of him. Step by step, he pushed forward the plan of Shenzhou. Now, the opportunity to open the passage between the 2 realms was right in front of them. Xian Ji was the only and most suitable candidate. In front of the Holy Land, the light of a formation platform flickered. Within the formation, a black and white jade pendant floated up and down. It was the Yin-Yang Jade, the most precious treasure of the immortal ascension realm of a major sect that had been destroyed. Xian Ji stood in the middle of the formation and formed a series of hand seals with a flip of his hand. The light of the formation grew brighter and brighter. 7 days passed, and the Holy Land was quiet, waiting for the most important moment of the century to arrive. In the Longevity Hall, the Disaster King moved, ready to go to the Holy Land. However, just 100 miles away from the Longevity Hall, he was stopped by a plainclothed figure. "It's you," the Disaster King said coldly, squinting his eyes. There was no reply. Only the light of the blade responded. Purple dragon chi surged, mighty and powerful. The Disaster King saw that the situation wasn't right. He retreated 100 feet and flipped his hands, trying to summon the rebirth mirror in the Longevity Hall. However, after waiting for a dozen days and nights, Ningchen wouldn't give him another chance. The light of the blade was like lightning, closing in on him. "Junior, you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." The Disaster King was furious. He turned his palm and used the flowing light battle suit to block the light of the blade. With a bang, the two of them retreated half a step. Before they could recover, the light of the blade fell like lightning again. In an instant, a dozen purple lights flashed past. On the remembrance blade, fate was added to it. Space couldn't bear it. Cracks appeared and kept spreading, reaching hundreds of feet away. The Shenzhou War of the Four Extremities realm was a battle of the future. Everything in the world was destroyed, and everything within dozens of miles was destroyed. Ning Chen's battle intent reached its limit. He was determined to cut down the Disaster King here. The purple light of the blade was mighty. Each strike was stronger than the last. The more the Disaster King fought, the angrier he became. As the king of the three disasters, he was forced to this point by a junior. How could he endure this? Ha! The pride of a king could not be blasphemed. The Disaster King roared angrily, and a gloomy aura spread out from his body. In an instant, the entire ground was affected, rising up with a rumble. The might of the three disasters shook the world. Ning Chen was not afraid at all. He stabbed his blade into the ground and slammed his right palm down. His body drew in the dragon chi in the blade, and a heavenly book martial art appeared. Earth Scroll, Earth Destruction, Mountain Destruction. The blade light rushed into the sky like a tide. It was endless, rising from the ground and rushing into the sky. The shocking momentum shook the world. The rising ground immediately collapsed and was destroyed. Sand flew everywhere, and there was no place left intact. Purple chi flashed through the sand again, instantly arriving in front of the Disaster King. With a bang, the blade and palm collided. The vigorous force destroyed another 100 feet. The two people who had fought to the peak were filled with killing intent. They had surpassed the power of the 5 tribulations, and even the moonlight paled in comparison. Within the Longevity Hall, the two Xiantian experts sensed the shockwaves from the battle in the distance. Just as they were about to go and help, they suddenly found themselves unable to move. The figure that appeared in the air was blurry, and they could not see her face clearly. She only raised a finger, and the world was frozen, making the two Xiantian experts feel like they were trapped in a cage. He said that he wanted to focus on this battle without any distractions, so he could not be disturbed by anyone. She owed him a favor, and she had repaid it today. 100 miles away from the Longevity Hall, blood had already begun to seep out of the corner of Ning Chen's mouth. However, his battle intent was still unparalleled. The purple chi was like a furnace, shining brightly. In his strongest moment, even though he had temporarily lost his sword and his left arm, he still relied on his cultivation and luck to fight the Disaster King alone. 3 terrifying slashes appeared on the Disaster King's battle armor. This was the best work of an earthly blacksmith. Its sharpness was comparable to the gilded feather saber, and even the flowing light battle armor was unable to block it. Blood-red light shone on the cold moon. With the 3 scrolls, Ning Chen's battle prowess was no longer inferior to anyone after using his luck to make up for the difference in cultivation. His battle spirit was dazzling. Damn it! The Disaster King forced the blade light back with a single punch. The humiliation of being suppressed completely erupted. Yuan condensed in his palms, and he used the Longevity Hall's 10,000-year legacy move. A black moon appeared in the sky, illuminating the world. As soon as the black moon appeared, all life within several dozen miles scattered. The flowers, birds, beasts, and insects all turned to dust, dissipating between heaven and earth. A surging might that could destroy the heavens struck fear into people. Boundless pressure spread out. Even 100 miles away, the forgotten sorrow could sense this terrifying aura. It looked into the distance, and a glimmer of light flashed through its eyes. In the battle, Ningchen waved his hand, and Nianqing spun rapidly in the air. He raised his hand again, and snow drifted through the air. A snow-white sword condensed, and an instant later, the luck within the blade connected. The sword hummed as it absorbed the purple qi. Heaven and earth resonance. Frost condensed on the sword's fingers, and rays of light streaked through the air. The blade and sword flew out like purple rainbows. Heaven and earth resonance appeared in the world once more. With a loud bang, the two extreme moves collided. The black moon exploded, the sand flew wildly, and the wind howled furiously. The corners of the two people's mouths were dyed red as they retreated several steps. This was the first time the Disaster King felt the threat of death. He was unable to conceal his shock and fury. Ever since he had entered the three disasters, he had never felt something like this before. Even if he didn't want to admit it, the youth in front of him now had the strength to match him. Within the four extreme holy lands, Xianji's grand formation had already reached its final stage. The four extreme realms master appeared, and Xian Tian also walked out. He silently followed behind the four extreme realms master. Disaster King, are you still not coming? The four extreme realms master looked into the distance, his dignified eyes flashing with light. The formation had already been completed. The four extreme realms master, Xian Tian, and Xian Ji walked in. The formation flickered, and the three of them instantly vanished. At the peak of the 9 heavens, boundless spatial turbulence flowed. Meng Xuanji was already not far from the sky. She walked forward step by step. The light in front of her grew brighter and brighter. It was the light from another world, warm and unfamiliar. She didn't know that danger was right in front of her. At the peak of the 9 heavens, only those who had reached the third tribulation could reach it. Coupled with the spatial turbulence, it wouldn't be easy to invade the divine prefecture. The Sacred Lands plan of 100 years and the Longevity Hall worked together openly and covertly. They first destroyed the Immortal Ascension realm in order to obtain the most crucial item in the plan, the Yin-Yang Jade. At the end of the spatial turbulence, Meng Xuanji, who had walked for nearly a month, finally reached the sky. She flipped her palm and pushed away the illusions in front of her. A barren land appeared before her. It seemed to be right in front of her, yet it was so far away that she couldn't touch it. Do you see it? How about it? Why don't you come with me and expand the divine prefecture? The four extreme realms master and Xian Ji appeared. They looked at the woman in front of them. Meng Xuanji's pupils shrank. A chill rose around her. She clenched her golden feather gauze tightly and was on full alert. What a pity. The four extreme realms master sighed softly. He raised his hand, and a surge of pressure swept down. Meng Xuanji was about to attack when a clear sword suddenly emerged from her Dantian sea of qi. It was so silent that she couldn't react in time. How can this be? Meng Xuanji spat out a mouthful of blood and her aura wildly scattered. She looked at the golden feather gauze in her hand and was about to throw it into the spatial turbulence. However, Xian Ji was already prepared. He flipped his hand and used a strange magical art. The golden feather gauze seemed to be bound by threads and slowly flew over. Xian Ji pulled out the clear sword, bringing with it a dazzling spray of blood. A gentleman couldn't be unsheathed. Xian Ji remained silent and didn't say another word. Ning Chen, I'm sorry. Meng Xuanji has disappointed you. Meng Xuanji's kneeling figure was covered in blood. How pitiful and desolate was she to be reduced to such a state. Meng Xuanji covered her mouth as she coughed violently. Blood seeped through the gaps between her fingers, staining her eyes red. Outside the longevity hall, the separation death seal within Ning Chen's body rapidly scattered. In the blink of an eye, it had completely disappeared. Ning Chen's expression changed. Something had happened to Meng Xuanji. In that instant, the saber light froze. The Disaster King seized the opportunity and pushed Ning Chen back with a palm strike. Then, he rushed towards the sacred land. Ning Chen came back to his senses and quickly chased after him. The two figures sped through the sky one after the other. After a flash of light, there was a vast expanse of purple chi. The Disaster King appeared in the sacred land. He stepped into the formation and quickly disappeared. Stop him. Hold on until this king and the realm master return. Yes. 7 Xiantian experts walked out. 2 were at the 4th tribulation, 2 were at the 3rd tribulation, and 3 were at the 2nd tribulation. The 7 of them worked together to stop the Disaster King with the help of the sword formation. Ning Chen faced him with a single saber. His purple chi had weakened a lot. For the sake of killing the Disaster King, he had to finish everything in one fell swoop. The Disaster King arrived. He glanced at Meng Xuanji, who was covered in blood, and sneered. In the end, it had still come to this. Begin. The realm master of the 4 extreme realms didn't ask anything. The Disaster King stepped forward and suppressed his injuries. His cultivation base was raised to the limit. Dim light soared into the sky as he raised his cultivation base to the limit. The realm master of the 4 extreme realms also condensed his chi. A 5-colored brilliance rose and poured into the golden feather lance. It crashed into the point where the 2 realms connected. In that instant, the entire realm master of the 4 extreme realms trembled. Countless volcanoes erupted and the earth cracked. It was like the end of the world. The mountains and rivers were being destroyed. Heaven and earth wept. In just an instant, countless peoples suffered the calamity of heaven and earth. Corpses littered the ground. It was a sad and desolate scene. A fine crack appeared in the boundary between the 2 realms, and it quickly widened. Xianji. The Disaster King, the realm master of the 4 extreme realms, shouted. His aura soared to the sky. He used all his cultivation base to open the crack to the point where one person could pass through. When Xianji saw this, his figure flashed and disappeared. At this time, space swirled and Sui walked out. She looked around and quickly began to move. Chapter 261. After Xianji entered, the master of the 4 extreme realms and the Disaster King could no longer hold on, and the crack between the 2 realms began to slowly close. At that moment, Sui appeared. She waved her hand and collected the kneeling figure. The remembrance blade flew out and stabbed into the crack. Purple chi surged out and prevented the crack from closing. Suyi's figure entered the crack and disappeared in the blink of an eye. When the Disaster King saw this, he furiously circulated his true essence and slammed his palm into the crack. His palm energy surged and shook the heavens. In the boundary passage, Ning Chen's remembrance blade spun as he pushed his body to the limit. He also slashed out with his blade at the Disaster King. The 2 attacks collided, and the Disaster King suffered a backlash. His mouth turned red as he was heavily injured. What a pity! A final sigh of regret came from the boundary passage before the crack closed with a bang, drowning out all sound. Under the sky, the master of the 4 extreme realms glanced at the Disaster King and asked, "How is it?" "I'm fine." The Disaster King said calmly as he calmly suppressed the roiling blood energy in his body without leaving a trace. The master of the 4 extreme realms nodded and said, "Xian Tian, from today onwards, help the Disaster King conquer the various sections. Within half a year, we will unify the 4 extreme realms." Xian Tian respectfully bowed and gave the order. "Disaster King, I'll leave the rest to you." The master of the 4 extreme realms turned around. Understood, the Disaster King replied. In the boundary passage, Xianzhi and Ningchen briefly glanced at each other before passing through. However, they did not enter at the same time. They had been separated for an unknown amount of time and could not touch each other. All that was left behind were afterimages. Sui disappeared with a cold smile that seemed both smug and mocking at the same time. Ningchen did not pay any more attention to him. He activated his true essence to protect Meng Xuanji, who was nearing the end of her life. He did his best to heal her. However, her Dantian Sea of Qi had been destroyed, and her true essence had been shaken. Most of her meridians had been destroyed, and her body had been seriously injured. This was not something that could be healed. His true essence was like a stone sinking into the ocean, and it had no effect at all. Blood dripping down, Suyi's clothes, which had been stained with blood several times. Meng Xuanji, hold on. Ningchen didn't want to give up. He waved his hand, and the remembrance saber spun rapidly. The vast purple qi fell and separated from the saber. Then, it entered Ningchen's body. The purple qi in the boundary passage was vast and mighty. Gradually, it became weaker and weaker until it finally disappeared. The blade turned from purple to pure white once again. The luck dissipated and returned to its original state. The three calamities were unstoppable. Going against the flow to slay immortals consumed a lot of energy. After fighting the Calamity King, there wasn't much energy left in the saber. Now, in order to save Meng Xuanji, it was all used up. With his luck depleted, Ningchen activated the Scroll of Life again. A waterfall of frost surged and snowflakes fell. Meng Xuanji's body was quickly sealed in ice. Divine Great Land, Ascension Valley. The void rolled and Xianzhi walked out. After he landed, he flipped his hands and made a complicated seal. Many talismans flew out and disappeared into the void. After doing this, Xianzhi revealed a cold smile. His feet moved, and he turned into a stream of light and left. Half a day later, the void trembled again. Ningchen walked out with Meng Xuanji. As soon as he stepped on the ground, the surroundings became brighter and brighter. In all directions, cyan flames shot out one after another, bringing with them a chilling aura. Before they even reached him, he could already feel a powerful chill. Ningchen's expression didn't change. He was already prepared. He spun his saber, and a sky-blue radiance rose to protect his body. The green flames collided with the rising brilliance and could not advance any further. In the next moment, the blue brilliance spread out, carrying with it countless blade lights. It destroyed everything in its path and disappeared into the void. The talisman in the void was revealed and immediately collapsed. Sui walked out of the aftermath and went away step by step. On this day, the great Xia Jiming Marquis returned. Divine Great Land. The flames of war burned through half of the Divine Land. After Beimeng retreated, Great Xia could gather troops in the west and counterattack the Eternal Night Cult. Marquis Xiang, Marquis Jiyu, and Marquis Bai returned from outside Heaven's Gate and quickly headed west. The 300,000 battle-hardened soldiers guarding the borders in the past couldn't be compared to the temporary reinforcements from the various cities of Great Xia. Together with Marquis Kaishuan's Black Water Army, they quickly defeated the heavy cavalry of the Eternal Night Cult in the west. The four Marquises led the troops to attack the first hall of the Eternal Night Cult. They were determined to get rid of this threat once and for all. However, just as they were about to succeed, another change occurred. To the left of the first hall of the Eternal Night Cult, heaven and earth rumbled. A majestic palace that wasn't inferior to the first hall slowly rose from the ground and appeared in front of everyone. The second hall of the Eternal Night Cult appeared. In an instant, countless formation patterns resonated between heaven and earth. The killing formation was activated. The vanguard army of Great Xia suffered heavy losses and retreated hundreds of miles away. No one knew how many dynasties were involved, and the chaotic scene of 1,000 years ago was recreated. In the second hall of the Eternal Night cult, the Eternal Night military advisor stood in the middle of the hall. In the void, an illusory chessboard engraved between heaven and earth appeared faintly. Black and white pieces were placed, and the world's structure was determined. Zhong Qianxiu, how's the plan? The martial lord walked over, his tyrannical aura surging. After 2 years, his strength seemed to have increased. The 7 marquises of the Great Xia Empire all have extraordinary strength, and they can fight well. Facing them head-on is definitely not a good plan. However, the Great Xia Empire also has a weakness, and that is that their peak battle strength is insufficient. Tonight, I will set up a formation to trap Marquis' triumphant return, and then I will lead you to the imperial city of the Great Xia Empire. At that time, the dean of the Tiansong Academy will be entrusted to you, martial lord. Zhong Qianxiu waved his hand and placed a black piece, saying indifferently. The martial lord nodded. He had no objections to the former's plan. In terms of strategy, the second hall master's height was indeed not something he could compare to. In front of the Netherworld Palace, Bai Yi took form and walked in. Who is it? In the stone cave, the ghost girl who was cultivating suddenly opened her eyes. Her figure flashed, blocking the path of the person who came in. Ghost girl, I trust you have been well since we last met. Ning Chen revealed a trace of a smile as he spoke. You, the ghost girl's delicate body trembled. Under the big red veil, her beautiful eyes revealed a look of disbelief. She had clearly seen him and Ascension Valley turn to ash in that sea of flames, disappearing without a trace. How, that familiar aura couldn't lie. The ghost girl slowly lifted the red veil, revealing her charming face. She stared at Ning Chen without blinking. You didn't die. I died and then I came back to life. It's hard to explain in a few words. Ning Chen lightly smiled. I've always wanted to ask, why do you always wear a red veil? It's not like you're so ugly that you can't show your face in public. Ning Chen casually asked, then walked back to his original stone room. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask. You don't want to know the answer. After a brief moment of excitement, the ghost girl recovered her calm. Ha! Ning Chen didn't mind. If she didn't want to talk, then he wouldn't. Everyone had their own secrets. His curiosity wasn't that heavy. Within the stone room, the Deathbreaker bow and heaven-pardoning arrow were placed there in perfect condition. However, the ink sword had been destroyed in Ascension Valley. What happened to your arm? The ghost girl asked. It's a bit injured. Right, do you still have the 9 Wonders separation flower? If you don't need it, you can return it to me, Ning Chen said rather shamelessly. You've already given it to me, the ghost girl indifferently said. Ha, there's no need to be so calculative between friends. Ning Chen smiled. When did I say that I was your friend? Although she said that, the ghost girl still waved her hand and threw over a jade box. Half of the 9 Wonders separation flower quietly lay inside the box. Its vitality was boundless and extremely extraordinary. This is for you. Ning Chen took the box and threw over a ball of red light. The ghost girl narrowed her eyes and slowly said, Phoenix blood? He had this aura on his body. Although it was very faint, it could still be felt. Ning Chen nodded and took 2 steps forward to put away his things. He asked, how long have I been gone? 2 years. The ghost girl calmly said. Ning Chen frowned and said, can you tell me what happened in these 2 years? Ghost girl nodded and told him everything she knew bit by bit. Zhong Qianxiu. Hearing this name that came up the most, a trace of brilliance flashed through Ning Chen's eyes. Was this another outstandingly intelligent strategist? The Eternal Night cult had become a huge threat in the end. It seemed that this time, not only did he have to deal with the matter of the 4 extremes, he also had to deal with the strategist of the Eternal Night cult. The number 1 strategist of the Eternal Night cult, the number 1 person in the world, a wiser person who surpassed Fan Lingyue. Ning Chen didn't say anything when he heard the ghost girl's evaluation of Zhong Qianxiu. Perhaps, but he would only know after a real confrontation. Chapter 262. The cold moon was like a hook hanging high up in the sky, spreading down a chill. Great Xia had entered winter from late autumn, and half of its territory had started to freeze. On the western battlefield, the Eternal Night Cult's army had launched a large-scale invasion. The Blackwater army was pinned down by the cult's heavy cavalry, while the Divine Martial Army was at the rear. More than 100,000 soldiers from different battlefields took turns to attack. Around Marquis' victorious return, lines of formation runes rose. 49 Pinnacle Heaven's Reach warriors joined forces to protect the formation, temporarily trapping the Great Xia war god. The foundation of the Eternal Night Cult was so deep that it was frightening. In the human world, a peak rank 9 martial artist would be regarded as a consecrator. However, the second palace of the Eternal Night Cult had produced such a shocking number of powerhouses. Even though Qianqiu had been preparing for this moment for a long time, the formation he laid down was extremely powerful. Even someone as powerful as the Great Xia war god couldn't break it in a short period of time. In the royal capital of Grand Xia, numerous silhouettes appeared, their auras towering up into the sky, terrifying to the extreme. The person in the lead was dressed in a light purple fur coat. He had a handsome face and a slightly cold expression. Behind him, 12 figures stood in a row. Just by standing there, they gave off a terrifying feeling that they were heavier than mountains. The Divine Martial Guards, the personal guards of the second Hall head of Eternal Night. Every generation, there were only 12 of them, and the weakest was half-stepped to Xiantian. The Xiantian realm was a huge moat on the martial path, and it was extremely difficult to cross. However, in this generation of Divine Martial Guards, 2 people had managed to cross it. The cultivation of the Divine Martial Guards was special, and the green-white armor they wore was also different. It was carved with complicated formation patterns, and each one of them had an unimaginably huge price to pay. Even the Eternal Night Cult, which had a deep foundation, found it difficult to do so. However, the combat strength of the Divine Martial Guards was shocking, and each one of them was comparable to Xiantian. Especially the 2 who had stepped into Xiantian, they were extremely terrifying. As soon as Zhong Qianqiu and the others appeared, Xia Zi, Grand Preceptor, and Qing Ning, who were in King Hao's manor, Grand Preceptor's manor, and the Imperial Palace, all sensed the presence of Zhong Qianqiu's group. Just the 3 of you? Zhong Qianqiu swept his gaze over them. Zhong Qianqiu, you shouldn't have come here. The Grand Tutor took half a step forward and said coldly. First Khanate tribulation. Even the capital of the Confucian sect has fallen to such a state. It seems the once flourishing Confucian sect has also declined, said Zhong Qianqiu. In the academy, 2 powerful figures were confronting each other. One was Dean Tian Song and the other was the Eternal Night Martial Monarch. Their auras collided within a radius of 30 meters, forming an absolute forbidden domain. Not far away, in an ordinary courtyard, the headmaster stood up and picked up a lamp. His old body began to bend. 2 years had passed, and the headmaster had aged even more. The headmaster didn't care about the battle between the college and the imperial city. When he heard the voices of the people in the world, he sighed. What they didn't know was that the decline of the Confucian school was not because of their martial prowess, but because of their hearts. As for why there were fewer and fewer Xiantian experts in the Confucian sect in the last 1,000 years, the reason was because of him. Teacher, you just broke through not too long ago, so your realm isn't stable yet. Zi should do it, Xia Zi said calmly as she walked out. Be careful. The Grand Advisor did not try to be brave and instructed. Yes. Xia Zi nodded and clenched her fist. An ancient sword appeared in the form of an autumn water splendor. The famed edge of the Confucian school, the silent autumn waters. Behind him, Qing Ning flipped her hand and took out the silver spear blade and body. After combining them, she stood quietly at the side, ready to attack at any time. Hua Zhuang, Zhong Qianqiu said. As she spoke, a beautiful figure walked out. She wore a green and white battle suit. Her expression was calm, and she didn't smile at all. Hua Zhuang was one of the 2 Xiantian experts in this generation's 12 Divine Martial Guards. After Hua Zhuang, 5 figures walked out and surrounded Great Xia's King Haowu. The 6 divine martial guards stood in the air. The battle patterns on their battle suits flickered, giving half-step Xiantian experts the ability to walk in the air. The leader, Hua Zhuang, was already at the second tribulation of the Xiantian realm. With the battle suit behind her, her aura was even more terrifying. Zhong Qianqiu waved his hand, and rays of light landed on the 6 of them. Instantly, their aura became even stronger, causing others to be terrified. The Grand Advisor, Qing Ning, had a serious expression. While she was watching this battle, she was also on guard against the others. "Kill!" Hua Zhuang ordered calmly. She took a step forward with her halberd in hand. Her halberd shook the world, causing the heavens and earth to lose their color. Xia Zi's expression did not change. Righteous qi exploded from her body. White light rose, and autumn water flowed. Her sword met the halberd head-on. With a loud bang, the void exploded. Terrifying shockwaves spread out, shaking the heavens and the earth. At the same time, the other 5 rushed forward. Saber lights were everywhere, and the situation was instantly sealed. The 6 of them formed a formation. Their terrifying combat power was comparable to the third tribulation of the Xiantian realm. At this moment, sharp killing lights flashed continuously. With the situation pressing, silent autumn water no longer remained silent. She released a dazzling light. The halberd light was heavy, the sword light was heavy, and the saber light was fast, but the sword light was even faster. The 6 of them formed a formation, but for a moment, they didn't gain anything. Xia Zi, who was only at the second tribulation of the Xiantian realm, had displayed shocking combat power. Oh? Zhong Qianqiu's eyes flashed. He didn't expect Great Xia's King Haowu to be so capable. If Ning Chen was here, he wouldn't be surprised. Although the former first prince of Grand Xia was kind-hearted and wasn't suitable to be an emperor, he was a true heaven's chosen. If it wasn't for that arrow, he might have left the rest of the younger generation far behind. Xia Zi didn't like to fight. Hence, in the eyes of the world, he wasn't that dazzling. Compared to Underworld's child of hell, God Sect's child of God, and Sword One of Desolate City, he was much weaker. However, in terms of true strength, Great Xia's King Haowu wasn't weaker than anyone. In fact, he might even be stronger. With the 5 sabers working together, Hua Zhuang gave up on defense and only attacked. God power added to the halberd's might, causing a huge explosion. Xia Zi's sword blocked the pass. Righteous qi was dazzling, lighting up the entire sky of the imperial city. His sword was like 1,000 caddies, breaking through the heavens and sinking into the ocean. Remnant wind. Seeing that the person in the formation was unshakable, Zhong Qianqiu summoned another Xiantian. Remnant wind walked out, and the remaining 5 divine martial guards followed. Their figures flashed as they stepped into the battle. A silver spear light swept out, blocking the 6 of them. Qing Ning also entered the battle. Grand Sage couldn't continue to watch, so he opened the Confucian sect golden scroll to help Qing Ning. Saber light and sword shadows crisscrossed, and the silver spear flew back and forth. After adding on the power of the Confucian sect golden scroll, it also didn't allow Remnant Wind and the others to take a step forward. The 2 of them fought bravely, using their ultimate techniques to protect the 1,000-year dynasty and its millions of citizens. However, the strongest among them had yet to make a move. Zhong Qianqiu's cold eyes flickered with a brilliant light as he walked forward step by step. With a lift of his right hand, numerous runes flew out and formed a gigantic formation in the sky. Within the Heavenly Mandate Palace, 3 Dark Dragon Guard commanders with golden patterns on their robes knelt, asking the person on the throne to give the order to activate the foundation of the nation armament. Xia Mingri got up and said, "Permission granted." The 3 Dark Dragon Guard commanders deeply bowed, and their figures flashed as they disappeared from the palace. Not long after, the ground beneath the imperial palace rumbled. Under the purple fate that was countless times stronger than the fate of the Lihua dynasty, several powerful auras appeared. The next moment, an old figure opened his eyes. He only glanced at the sky before walking up. An ancient and desolate aura rippled out from the elder's body. Although it was powerful, it was short-lived. The last light of his life was only allowed to shine once. "Welcome, Emperor Xiaoyu." Xia Mingyue knelt down. This was the first time he had kowtowed to someone since becoming an emperor. Great Xia's Emperor Xiaoyu was the only brother of the 13th generation Emperor of Great Xia. The two of them had worked together to protect Great Xia for 40 years. Within the killing formation, Xia Zi sensed the unique bloodline aura of the imperial family from the elder. His body trembled, and a trace of sadness appeared in his eyes. "Not bad." The old man glanced at Chu Zi, who was fighting bravely in the middle of the formation. A faint gratification flashed across his aged face. The bloodline of the imperial clan did not disappoint him. Seeing the elder's appearance, Zhong Qianxiu frowned. A peak third tribulation expert was not to be underestimated. Yin and Yang, 4 divisions, no sun in 8 directions, raging sea of thunder. Zhong Qianxiu formed a seal with both hands. Thunder rumbled as the dark clouds in the sky roared. Terrifying bolts of lightning crisscrossed, turning the surrounding 300 meters into a sea of thunder. The might of the curse shook the heaven and earth. As the lightning descended, the Emperor Xiaoyu's feet moved and arrived in front of the Evernight strategist. He slapped out with a palm, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Zhong Qianxiu flipped his palm to block the attack. With a bang, he was forced back 3 steps as his blood and qi churned. Great Xia's foundation is indeed extraordinary. Unfortunately, it won't last long. Thunderbolts descended, filling the eyes with dazzling lightning. Xiao Yuwang's figure shifted rapidly, constantly switching between the thunderbolts. He could not avoid them, so he turned his palms to block them. However, every time he blocked a thunderbolt, his aura would weaken a little. Zhong Qianxiu saw that the person in front of him could not last long, so he chose not to clash head-on. Instead, he used his lightning arts to trap the enemy and wait for the former to dissipate. "You're going too far." Amidst the killing formation, Xia Zi could feel the Emperor Xiaoyu's aura weakening. His rage could no longer be suppressed, and killing intent finally appeared. The winds and clouds on his sword changed as the righteous energy turned benevolent, showing signs of Azura. Hua Zhuang and the others immediately felt the pressure increase. A sword light flashed in front of one of the divine martial guards, and by the time he turned around, his head had already been separated from his body. Xia Zi took the halberd head-on and flew out of the killing formation. He arrived in front of Zhong Qianxiu in an instant and slashed down with his sword. Zhong Qianxiu retreated and dodged the sword. His right hand flashed, and 4 talismans flew out. Yin and Yang, 4 divisions, no sun in 8 directions, borrowing power from heaven and earth. 4 flame divine generals appeared in the world. Each of them was over 30 meters tall, and when they swung their fists down, a terrifying heatwave ignited the surrounding air. The Evernight military advisor had gone all out with the descent of the divine generals and the martial monarch. Just at this moment, ghostly energy spread out from the distant horizon. Amidst the ringing of bells, a person and a palanquin slowly walked over. Beside the palanquin, a familiar figure appeared. His white robes fluttered in the wind. At this moment, everyone in the world was shocked. Looking at the figure beside the palanquin, their faces were filled with disbelief. Sensing the dangerous aura coming from this person, Master Yan's expression turned serious. He said, "Your name?" "Great Xia Jiming Marquis, Ning Chen."
Chapter 263. The most ordinary name gave people the deepest shock. Wu Ho, who sacrificed everything to protect Great Xia, had finally returned after 2 years. "Welcome, Wu Ho." In the palace, the dragon guards were the first to react. They put down their weapons and knelt down respectfully to welcome the return of their Marquis. "Welcome, Wu Ho." After the dragon guards knelt down, the imperial guards also came back to their senses. They knelt down one by one with respect to welcome the return of Wu Ho. After the shock, the people in the palace also reacted. They looked at the familiar figure in the sky. At this moment, guilt, regret, excitement, and all sorts of thoughts flashed across their minds. Finally, they knelt down and bowed respectfully. "Welcome, Wu Ho." The people who knelt down in the city kowtowed together with the most sincere respect. The deafening greeting shook the heavens and the earth. It resounded throughout the entire palace, announcing Great Xia's gratitude and longing for the person in the sky. At the most difficult moment, the white figure was not only covered in blood, but also took on the infamy of the world. He silently endured everything and sacrificed everything to protect Great Xia. In front of the heavenly mandate palace, Xia Mingri looked at the scene in front of him. Although he had mixed feelings, he did not say anything. In the ghost carriage, the ghost girl walked out. Looking at the figures below, she was shocked. "Rise," said Ning Chen. He was as calm as ever, and there wasn't much emotion in his voice. Inside and outside the palace, after hearing the voice from the sky, everyone got up. Looking at the sky, the worry on their faces disappeared. There was no longer the fear of the enemy's invasion. In the past, Wu Ho was able to lead Great Xia through difficult times. Today, he would be able to do the same. Behind the four flame generals, Zhong Qinxiu squinted his eyes. Jiming Marquis, so he was the legendary Wu Ho of Great Xia who stopped Lingyue from going south. Ning Chen glanced at the situation on the battlefield and roughly understood. He walked to Xia Zi's side and asked, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." The murderous vibes around Xia Zi gradually dissipated, and the undetectable change disappeared. The qi of righteousness once again filled his entire body. Seeing the change in Xia Zi's body, Ning Chen's eyes flashed with worry. However, this was not the time to say anything. He focused on the enemy. "Leave this person to me," Ning Chen said softly. "N." Xia Zi nodded. His figure flashed and appeared beside Xiao Yuan, waving his sword to block the thunderbolts in the sky. The power of talismans was amazing. Zhong Qinxiu was the second lord of the Eternal Night Palace. In addition to his outstanding strategy, his attainments in formations and incantations were extraordinary.
Coupled with his cultivation of the third tribulation of the innate realm, his threat was no less than that of the Eternal Night Martial Monarch. On Ning Chen's left and right, four flame deity generals surrounded him. Their giant fists fell, and waves of fire covered the sky and covered the earth. The remembrance blade appeared out of thin air. The pure white blade spun, and rays of blade light spread out. The flame general's arm was immediately torn apart, scattering in all directions. However, in the next moment, a shocking scene occurred. The flames that filled the sky quickly gathered at the flame divine general's severed arm, and in the blink of an eye, it grew back. Ning Chen frowned slightly. He reached out and grabbed the remembrance saber. His figure flickered and slashed at Zhong Qinxiu, who was not far away. "Is it that simple?" Zhong Qinxiu sneered coldly. With a wave of his sleeve, the four flame divinity generals disappeared and turned into four walls of fire in front of him. Boom! As the sharp blade light fell, the four divine flame generals collapsed one after another and scattered. Soon after, they gathered together again and were completely unharmed. 3,000 miles of sword snow. Ning Chen's expression turned serious. He raised his hand and pointed. Once again, frost surged around his body, and boundless cold air spread out rapidly. The temperature of 1,000 feet around him suddenly dropped, turning into a world of wind and snow. The sword intent spread out in the wind and snow, and the four frozen flame deity generals instantly fell apart, unable to gather again. Zhong Qinxiu narrowed his eyes. The dark green talisman appeared again in his right hand. With a wave of his hand, evil qi covered the moon. In the space stirred, half of a terrifying evil god with a green face and fangs appeared. Never ending. Before he finished speaking, Ning Chen's figure had already disappeared. The blade light was awe-inspiring, and it instantly arrived in front of Zhong Qianqiu to take his life. The green talisman was split in half by the blade light, and the evil god that had not fully manifested dissipated. It could not descend. Zhong Qianqiu's footsteps shifted as he dodged the blades that were ceaselessly descending upon him. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed that the other two battles were similarly at a disadvantage, and they were even faintly showing signs of defeat. He understood in his heart that his plan today had already failed. Retreat! Zhong Qianqiu pushed away the blade light in front of him and retreated dozens of feet. He waved his hand and summoned a boundless sea of fire. Hua Zhuang, Remnant Wind, and the others immediately retreated. Jinming Marquis. I will remember it. However, you will soon realize that the enemy you are facing is not as simple as 2 years ago. Behind the sea of fire, Zhong Qianqiu laughed coldly, and his figure faded away. Perhaps. Ning Chen waved his hand, and Nianqing retracted her brilliance. The battle ended, and the commoners and soldiers below rejoiced. Their nervous mood was finally put down. Imperial Ancestor. In the sky, Xia Zi supported the Xiaoyu king, who was already at the end of his life. A trace of sadness flashed across his eyes. The Xiaoyu king looked at the royal bloodline in front of him and then at the youth not far away. He no longer had any worries in his heart. It was enough for Great Xia to have such a royal bloodline and a martial Marquis. Before he could say another word, Xiaoyu king's body quickly disintegrated, turning into dust that filled the air and dissipated. The years that he owed were finally repaid at this moment. Looking at this scene, Ning Chen's heart was inexplicably complicated, and he fell silent. Imperial Ancestor Xiaoyu. Xia Zi felt a pain in his heart. A trace of grey aura flashed through his boundless righteousness. It was so fast, but it was still seen by Ning Chen, who was not far away. What happened? Let's go down. The Grand Advisor looked at everyone and said. Okay. The people in the sky all nodded. Their figures flashed, and they descended from the sky. Qing Ning walked over, and without saying anything, she slapped him mercilessly. Ning Chen held his head in pain, but could only smile apologetically. He did not dare to say anything. Immediately return to the palace with me to see the Empress. Qing Ning said with a cold face. Ning Chen did not dare to say anything. He nodded and signaled to the ghost girl not far away, then left with Qing Ning. When he passed by Xia Zi, Ning Chen paused, but did not know how to remind him. He could only suppress the uneasiness in his heart and continue forward. In the imperial palace, the doors opened. The dragon guards respectfully knelt down, and their majestic figures lined up from the entrance to the main palace. Greetings to the Marquis. Once upon a time, when he went south to resist the Buddha kingdom, the Battle of Mount Mijia, and quelled the rebellion in the imperial city, the soldiers of the dragon guards had always followed their Marquis. They had witnessed his sacrifice for the Xia kingdom. Even in the darkest moment, when the world cursed him, they had never doubted their Marquis. Rise. It was still the same calm voice, but this time, there was something more. Ning Chen looked at the familiar faces on both sides, and a touch of warmth flashed through his heart. In the heavenly mandate palace, Xia Mingri saw the two coming and nodded in greeting. Ning Chen briefly explained the situation of the four extremities, mainly describing the characteristics of the person who came back with him, so that Xia Mingri could pay more attention. If a Xiantian expert wanted to hide, it would be very difficult to find. However, the people of the four extremities must have come to completely open the passage between the two realms. Then, they must have found a strong cultivator of the three disasters realm to help. This was the only clue, and also the most important one. In the Divine Prefecture, the number of strong cultivators of the three disasters realm could be counted on one hand. the college chief of the academy, the golden staff imperial preceptor of northern Meng, and the martial lord of the eternal night god. As for the others, they were more or less fake. Having the combat power of the Three Disasters realm did not mean that they were in the Three Disasters realm. Mu Bai, Marquis Victorious Return, and the former Prince Yen were typical examples. As for the abbot of the Du Yi Temple, he was indeed in the Three Disasters realm. However, after being nailed to Mount Mijie and burned with resentment for several days and nights, no one knew what realm he was in now. To completely open the passage between the two realms, it required an extremely large amount of power. Only those in the Three Disasters realm could do it. As for whether the combat power of the Three Disasters realm was feasible, no one knew, and no one dared to take the risk. According to the rumors, the Eternal Night God sect should have 2 strong cultivators above the Three Disasters realm, and the Martial Lord was one of them. However, until now, even the second palace of the Eternal Night God had appeared, and that strong cultivator of the Three Disasters realm still had not appeared. This made people wonder whether this strong cultivator of the Three Disasters realm still existed. After all, no matter how strong a person was, he could not withstand the erosion of time. Even the Xiantian realm could only live for 200 or 300 years. Under normal circumstances, without a large amount of natural treasures to prolong their lives, there were not many people who could live for more than 300 years. Even if their cultivation reached the heavens, and they entered the Three Disasters realm, they could not live for more than 500 years. After hearing about the Four Extremes realm, Xia Mingri's expression was incomparably solemn. He did not expect that there would be such a great danger right in front of him. Indeed, before the first wave had subsided, another wave had risen. The two discussed for a while. Xia Mingri glanced at Qing Ning, who was quietly waiting not far away, and said seriously, "You just came back. Go to the Weiyang Palace and pay your respects first. We can talk about other things later." "Okay." Ning Chen nodded, and turned to leave with Qing Ning. Originally, men were not allowed to enter the harem, let alone at night. However, the Marquis of Jiming was an exception. In the world, everyone knew that when Ning Chen was still a little eunuch, he worked in the Weiyang Palace until he left the palace and became a marquis. It could be said that he was taught by the former Empress Zhangsun. For a long time, the Marquis of Jiming could enter and leave the Weiyang Palace freely. It was a matter that everyone tacitly agreed. No one would make a fuss about it. There was no need, and no one dared. Now, it was even more impossible. In the Weiyang Palace, the Zhangsun Palace was brightly lit, but it was a bit too quiet. The Zhangsun Palace was already asleep. The palace was not lit by the lights, but by the night-luminescent pearl that Ning Chen had once offered. The battle in the sky was so shocking that all the people in the imperial city were alarmed. Only the Zhangsun Palace was peaceful. There was no sound at all. In these 2 years, the Empress was easily awakened. So, every night, I would seal the Empress's palace and not let anyone disturb her. Qing Ning said. "Why not cover the night-luminescent pearl?" Ning Chen asked softly. "We can't cover it. Once it is covered, the Empress will immediately wake up." Qing Ning's expression flashed a touch of sadness. Chapter 264. 2 years had passed and Zhangsun had changed a lot. Although her face was still beautiful, her hair was covered with white frost. Ning Chen suddenly felt fear in his heart. It was a fear that he had never felt before. All along, Zhangsun had been a beautiful and strong figure in his eyes. Only today did he realize that Zhangsun was also gradually aging without him noticing. In his heart, Zhangsun was his only elder in this world. Her position was so important that no one could replace her. Gently pushing open the door without making any sound, Ning Chen walked into the room. Looking at the sleeping figure on the bed, he silently knelt down. The light of the night pearl shone on the plain clothes, reflecting a heart filled with guilt. The kneeling figure was no longer the Marquis of Xia. He was just a wanderer who had left home for a long time. Qing Ning did not stop him. She quietly stood at the side and waited. In the quiet palace, the kneeling plain clothes did not move. 2 years had changed too many things. The only thing that did not change was the feelings of protecting each other. Without Zhang Sun, Ning Chen would not be who he was today. This feeling was hard to return. The cold moon shone in the sky and gradually headed west. Unknowingly, Zhang Sun opened her eyes on the phoenix couch. Just as she sat up, she suddenly felt a familiar aura not far from the bed. She looked over in disbelief. The next moment, her body trembled and tears flowed down silently. "You're back." The saddest thing in life was when a white-haired person sent off a black-haired person. She once thought that the tablet on the Marquis temple would be placed by her personally. The wooden tablet that was sent over was carved with thousands of carvings. Today, he was back. "Come here." Zhang Sun waved her hand and said softly. Ning Chen stood up and silently walked to the side of the phoenix couch and sat down. Zhang Sun raised her hand and caressed the face of the young man in front of her. Her eyes were filled with tears again. "You've grown up." She still remembered that when he first entered the palace, he was still a reckless young man. Almost 4 years had passed and the young man in the past had lost his childishness. He had truly grown up. Ning Chen did not know what to say. No matter how eloquent he was, at this moment, only guilt was left in his heart. It was getting late outside. Although the night had not completely dispersed, Zhang Sun was no longer sleepy. She got up and walked down from the phoenix couch. In front of the dressing table, a beautiful face was reflected in the bronze mirror. The passage of time did not leave many traces on the face of the person in the mirror, just like when they first met 3 years ago. Qing Ning walked forward and picked up the silver comb on the table, preparing to dress her grandson as usual. "Let me do it." Ning Chen took the silver comb and asked softly. Qing Ning nodded and retreated to the side. After leaving for 2 years, Zhang Sun's hair had grown even longer. It hung down his back and reached his waist. Ning Chen held a comb and combed it seriously with a calm expression. The familiar warm aura made one feel at ease. Only in this Weiyang palace could he let down his guard and not think about the storms outside. In the past, when he was at his weakest, it was Zhang Sun who used her own wings to protect him time and time again. Now that he had reached the Xiantian realm, he no longer needed Zhang Sun's protection, but he still could only feel that peace by her side. "That sister of yours is not bad," Zhang Sun said softly as she looked at her reflection in the mirror. "Ning Shi?" Ning Chen asked. "Yes, I've already accepted her as my adopted daughter. However, before I get married, I'll continue to live in your Wu Marquis manor," said Zhang Sun. As long as Ning Shi is willing, Ning Chen naturally has no objections. "I'll follow your arrangements," replied Ning Chen. "What about you? You've already rejected the little princess of the barbarian dynasty and Xinu that I arranged for you. Do you have anyone you like now? If you like any girl, I'll personally propose marriage for you," said Zhang Sun seriously. Ning Chen bitterly smiled. What he was most afraid of was Zhang Sun mentioning this matter. Nyang Nyang, Ning Chen has already reached the Xiantian realm. His lifespan is different from ordinary people. "There's no need to be in such a rush," said Qing Ning. Zhang Sun fell silent. After a long time, she looked at herself in the mirror and muttered, "But I can't wait." It was a very soft sentence, but it made the two people present tremble. Looking at the strands of white hair that could be faintly seen in Zhang Sun's hair, their hearts ached. Zhang Sun really was no longer young. A mortal's lifespan was only 60 years. Zhang Sun was not a Xiantian, so she could not keep waiting. "I'll follow your arrangements." Ning Chen suppressed the bitterness in his heart and no longer insisted. "How about 3 years?" Zhang Sun naturally hoped that Ning Chen could be together with the person he liked, so she didn't want to force him. Softly, she said, "If you still haven't found the person you like after 3 years, then I'll make the arrangements." 3 years wasn't a short time. At that time, she would have more than half of her doubts. It was also the longest time she could wait. Although a mortal's lifespan was 60 years, there weren't many that could live past the age of destiny. In the past 2 years, she had gradually felt that her body was getting worse by the day. According to Great Xia's customs, the marriage of the younger generation had to have the blessing of the older generation. Xinu and Z still had imperial uncles that were still alive. As for Ning Chen, he only had her as an elder. He was the person she was most worried about. After her hair was combed, the rest of the makeup was taken care of by Qing Ning. Ning Chen stood to the side and waited quietly. Ever since she had retired behind the scenes, Zhang Sun rarely stepped out of Weiyang Palace. Her makeup had also become much simpler. She looked less luxurious and more simple. After winter, Great Xia had just experienced a bout of snow. The back garden of Weiyang Palace was covered in a layer of silver. It was very beautiful. Zhang Sun was supported by Qing Ning and Ning Chen as they walked in the back garden. Suddenly, she saw a maple tree in the corner and paused. Ning Chen followed her gaze and immediately understood what Zhang Sun was thinking. Back then, I heard Qing Ning say that you climbed from this tree to her roof to look at the stars, disturbing her rest. Zhang Sun's beautiful face revealed an almost undetectable smile. At the time I just entered the palace, I didn't think too much about it. I saw a tree next to the wall, so I climbed up. I didn't think that below it was Qing Ning's room, said Ning Chen. After saying this, Ning Chen glanced at the woman on the other side and smiled. However, Qing Ning's temper is good. She didn't bicker with me. Qing Ning turned her head, her right hand cracking. Her warning was very clear. This brat's skin was itching again. Zhang Sun smiled. How could she not understand the meaning behind Ning Chen's words? However, she ignored it. The younger generation was playing around. Let them do as they pleased. The three of them walked in the back garden. Most of the time, they didn't have much to say. 2 years had passed. There were too many things that needed to be said. When they were about to speak, they felt that there was no need. The rising sun shone on their bodies, bringing a slight warmth. Zhang Sun was tired from walking. The three of them sat on a stone bench in the garden to rest for a while. Qing Ning had brought a thick cotton cushion. It wouldn't be cold to sit on it. She had specially prepared it for Zhang Sun. Ning Chen saw that Qing Ning had carefully prepared everything. He inexplicably sighed in his heart and also sat down beside Zhang Sun. There wasn't much time left like this. He could only cherish every moment. Not long after, a delicate palace maid walked into the back garden. Seeing the three of them, she bowed and said, "Your Highness, Marquis, breakfast is ready." The palace maid was very unfamiliar and young. She should have just entered the palace not long ago. It was indeed fortunate that she was assigned to Weiyang Palace. Ning Chen responded. He immediately helped Zhang Sun up and walked out of the back garden. The palace maid followed behind. Her pretty little face was flushed. Her eyes were filled with admiration. She had also seen the great battle last night. Lord Wu Ho was really too powerful. Which family's young man wasn't passionate? Which family's young lady wasn't yearning for love? The palace maid was in the prime of her life. Of course, she would also admire heroes. Qing Ning helplessly shook her head. She didn't shatter the little girl's beautiful dream. She just put the blame on Ning Chen, who was beside Zhang Sun. Breakfast had already been sent to the hall. It was very simple. It was all light vegetarian dishes. In these 2 years, Zhang Sun had already stopped killing and didn't touch meat. Many people in the palace said that compared to the Buddha in the temple, their empress was more like a Buddha. Actually, the people of Xia didn't believe in Buddha. Zhang Sun, as the former empress, was naturally the same. However, whether she believed it or not, she still hoped to pray for him. After breakfast, the people in and out of the palace came one by one. It wasn't appropriate for Ning Chen to stay any longer. Thus, he bid farewell to Zhang Sun. Everyone in the manor knew that the Marquis would return today. They were all looking forward to it. The old housekeeper was so excited that tears rolled down his face. He had been waiting at the door since early in the morning. After more than 2 years, the Marquis was finally coming back. In the manor, Ningxi anxiously walked around. Her delicate doll-like face was also filled with excitement. Beside her, Lu Ruoxi was much quieter. However, the tears in her eyes revealed that she wasn't as calm as she looked on the surface. Just as everyone was looking forward to it, a white figure came from afar. It looked like he was still very far away, but after a few steps, he was already in front of the manor. "Brother!" Ningxi was the first to react. She immediately ran out of the door and rushed over. Lan Jun, who came from a dangerous building, had been specially trained in princess etiquette by Zhang Sun for a long time. At this moment, he completely forgot about it and cried without caring about his image. "Marquis!" Lu Ruoxi walked forward and bowed. Finally, she couldn't hold back the tears in her eyes and dripped down. "Okay, everyone get up. Let's go back to the manor first." Ning Chen patted Ningxi's back and gently pushed her away. He glanced at the group of people kneeling in front of the manor and said, "Yes." Everyone got up. The old housekeeper hurriedly pushed aside the people blocking the way and invited the Marquis into the manor. Very quickly, the news that the Marquis of Jiming had returned to his residence spread to the ears of every noble in the imperial city. Invitations to visit, along with generous gifts, were sent from every residence to the Marquis residence. In a room in the backyard of the Marquis manor, Ghost Girl looked at the deeply unconscious woman on the bed. With a flip of her palm, she circulated her body and a vast amount of true qi continuously poured into the latter's body. After a long time, Ghost Girl stopped and looked at Ning Chen. She said solemnly, "My ghost origin can only help her maintain her life for a while. If you want to save her, you have to think of another way." You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.